Sword of Coming Chapter 849. 20,000 words chapter. The update is a bit late. Such an unannounced goose feather snowfall is like an immortal crushing a white jade plate and spilling countless snowflakes. A thick layer of snow soon accumulated on the top of the city, and Qin Pingon, who was squatting, deliberately gathered his fist and sword energy, allowing the snowflakes to fall on the top of his head, shoulders and blue shirt. The cultivator does not invade the cold and heat. The so-called cold and heat actually not only refers to the circulation of the four seasons, but also the joys and sorrows of the hearts of the people. The site of the Xianxia Great Wall today is like a deserted city outside the Great Wall with no one guarding its borders. A lonely city outside the Guan, suddenly covered with snow, a little bit of blooming, the tracks are as big as coins, the mountains are cold and steep, the birds are hard to find, and the four savages disappear. Vaguely there is the sound of broken jade and the snow sings together. Lu Chen had already got up and put away the set of wine utensils that he didn't know where the autumn wind came from. Originally, Lu Chen planned to leave and return to the Qingming world. There are so many friends over there, and the master came to Bai Yujing before. Gave him this proud disciple a considerate decree: no longer need to go to heaven to do that useless work. Return to the Qingming world. Nothing in light, even the most disciplined brother cannot tell him. But it is really rare to come to the Great Wall of Sorqi. Lu Chen was reluctant to leave so quickly. He worked so hard to use the magical powers of a sage with Xianxia. After so hard to attract such a heavy snowfall, he cheeklessly did not move and began to reach out to take it. Shua quickly kneaded a snowball for him, constantly beating, becoming denser and heavier. Lu Chen gently tossed the snowball, rubbing his chin with one hand. The moon in the sky seems to gather snow. The snow on the earth is like the moon, the lonely light shines on the eyes. The moon and the snow are clear, but there is no one left. Qin Pingon laughed, and the kind that didn't smile was actually better than not laughing. Lu Chen smiled and threw the snowball out of the city head, drawing an arc to fall. Sure enough, we scholars are the most elegant, pure sword repairs like Miss Ning in Criminal House who are just a little bit off. Qin Pingon asked, Master Lu is not leaving yet? Lu Chen complained, mountains can drive mountains, people don't drive people. When Qin Qing was still here in the early years, Lu Chen actually wanted to come here as a guest. It was just that Lu Chen had to give up this plan with a face-saving senior, otherwise it would be alien's temper. And if you fall near Bai Yujing, you will definitely have to go to the fire. Yudo is really invincible, and you dare not go to the Great Wall of Xianxia to fight with the old sword fairy and let Lu Chen get it. As a junior, wouldn't it be too shameful if he met the old sword immortal at first sight and called him a brother? This is similar to Xianxia Gate, where the brothers and sisters in the family have never married, so naturally it is not easy for the brother and sister to marry in advance. In fact, Yudo had walked to the gate of the Great Wall of Xianxia, but in the end he didn't even ask Qin Qing about the sword, leaving only a catch-and-release pavilion where visitors from later generations kept coming. As for the inverted mountain, as the largest mountain in the world created by Yudo himself, it actually has no far-reaching intentions. It is the second head teacher of Bai Yujing who is truly invincible, thinking about the future, and will ask Qin Qing. There was a fairy at the time of the sword, so there was no need to look at the faces of the sages of the Confucian temple. After winning Qin Qingdu, he directly flew back to Bai Yujing from the wild world with the sword. Of course, until Qin Qing used the sword to pave the way for Feishing City, the second son Yudo did not make a move. As long as there is a chance to praise Yudo and Lu Chen, the senior Taoist masters of the brothers, naturally they will never be stingy with good words, and soon publicize a fair and comfortable language, saying that the swordsmanship is invincible. The two peaks stand side by side, each counts as its own. How can it not be really invincible? Who dares to say no? Come to Xuandu to watch, find the poor road to drink, stand on the wine table, dare to talk nonsense. To us Qingming world, when fighting, you are the first to be angry and can't kill you. Qin Pingon suddenly turned his head and said to Ning Yao, as long as Zhang teaches and people speak, they will not deceive, but they can't believe it all. It's the same truth as having no books. Some people talk and like to say only part of the truth deliberately, not the truth, and even make people stay away from the truth. Qin Pingan's words didn't take his heartfelt words into consideration. Ning Yao nodded and said, in the small town I have learned it a long time ago. Lu Chen patted the snow on his shoulders and said with a face, talking about people face to face is like asking punches and beating the face. It's not in line with the rules of the world. It's not in line with the rules of the world to talk about the nobles. Qin Pingon just watched the vast snow, thoughts and wandering thousands of miles, no longer deliberately restraining his complicated thoughts, trusting the horse by the rein, like a white horse running across the small world. Hauran poets used to have clouds. Snow is something with different roots and shoots, not a rich flower in the world. Many local customs and old sayings that have been passed down from generation to generation in a small town often have a lot of origins, and they are indeed very different from ordinary villages and villages. The rain, snow and dew that hasn't landed between the heavens and the earth are commonly called rootless water by the old people in the hometown. Nowadays the world's water transportation is divided into two. Lushwiking Dandan is in charge of land and water transportation, and the new 4 sea kings including Jigue, are in charge of all other water transportation. Aunt Feng was not the only wind in ancient times, so she did not rank among the 12 gods. Even the Middle-earth Confucian Temple, which has the richest collection of old yellow calendars, and the Summer Palace, which does not need to pay attention to taboos, still does not seem to have a complete catalogue of the 12 high-level gods. It is like the two sides are observing a certain agreement, deliberately concealing it and not allowing it. People leaf through. If the Jiaoshan account sword repairing Yusi is the reincarnation of the Rain Master, as the assistant official of one of the 5 highest water gods, but like Aunt Feng he has never been among the 12 gods, which means that Yusi was born in a barren nature. The reincarnation of the gods of the earth had once shared part of the responsibilities of the gods in the ancient times, and you see, the former Rain Master this time was a supplementary, and the gods of the water department were the main and respected. Earlier Lu Qin mentioned the sissy of the long kiln in his hometown. Qin Pingon actually immediately became immersed in his mind. At the same time he sacrificed a caged bird to protect his Taoist heart, so that Lu Qin, who was standing next to him, could not explore casually. Go to the book building built on the shore of Xinhu Lake to check the entries and search for all clues. Seeing that Qin Pingon continued to be a boring gourd, Lu Qin smiled to himself. Furthermore, I said half of what I said, but Qin Pingon, you are not the same. You deliberately didn't talk to me and chose to continue to pretend to be stupid. But it doesn't matter. Housework, I am a member of the Taoist school, you just believe in Buddhism and you are not really a monk. Neither of us pays attention to it. Lu Qin then raised his hands and after taking a breath of mist he kept rubbing his hands and said with a hippie smile, the heart is uncontrollable half of the world. How can you not step on one pair of straw shoes? Qin Pingon just ignored Lu Qin's words and ignored them. It's really this line that seems to be far away in the sky, but it is already close in front of you. Once picked up it can help you see a complete clue to the ins and outs. It may be a tug of war between Qin Pinyin and pure divinity. It's where a certain winner is too critical. Back then Qin Pingon carried the ancient sword Long Qi lent to him by the old sword fairy. He left the Jianqi Great Wall and traveled to the lotus flower-blessed land of Leiguanzu. After returning from Tongyi's Hao to Beipingzu, leilonking above the sea of clouds and under Fan Junmeo's protection, Qin Pingon once set out to refine the life thing of the 5 elements water. Fan Junmao, who later became the female mountain monarch of Nanyue Mountain, was the sister of Fan Air. Because she was the reincarnated god, she practiced together and broke through the realm quickly. When the two met for the first time they happened to run in opposite directions. They were on the 2 ferry boats along the long road. Fan Junmao later directly pointed out that she went to Old Man Yang on the trip to the north, which was equivalent to a generous confession of her god. Reincarnation status. When Qin Pingon completed the refining of the water seal, I remember that Fan Junmao, after seeing the weather in his Shui mansion, was able to let the little man in green clothes, who had a pure origin in the water law, willingly obey Qin Pingan's orders. At that time he was very surprised. He immediately got up, spoke hurriedly and said something strange that Qin Pingon didn't think much about. Fan Junmao directly asked Qin Pingon if he was the reincarnation of a rain master. Qin Pingon was confused when he heard it. At that time he also made a joke saying that Fan Junmao made a fresh and refined flattery. In the end Fan Junmao seemed to deny the speculation and said something more sacred, including a sissy, saying that Qin Pingan was far from it. What's more, even though Qin Pingon was too worried, all his thoughts were placed on Lu Tai, who had traveled with him all the way, and he really didn't think about the man in his hometown of Longyao. Even Qin Pingon guessed whether Lu Tai was the rain master. After all, the two parties were the first to take the Osmanthus Island ferry and pass by the Yulongzong with the statue of the rain master. There are indeed many ribbons on Lu Tai's vestments. So looking back now, it's just that Zhou Xian blindfold. Deliberately let yourself be dark under the light. Don't think about home affairs. Jiaxian account Tan's natal flying sword is armored cavalry, and Jian's Yusi, who possesses natal flying sword Waterfall, has a secret file in the Summer Palace, which is actually much better than Zhuzha, Lu Bai and Tan Tan. More. These two sword repairmen followed Zhou to the sky, occupying a seat in the old heaven, especially Yusi. They seem to have inherited the divinity that Li Lu was stripped of, making the original gods not in the 12th century. The 4 reigns in the list are high, which is equivalent to several consecutive jumps, directly serving as one of the 5 highest water gods. It's just that Qin Pingon still doesn't know something. Assuming that the man from the long kiln worker in his hometown is indeed a high-ranking rain god, then he is really dead. Old Man Yang used the magical power to cover the sky and the sun, so his divinity disappeared, returned to heaven and earth, and was held in his hand by Old Man Yang again. Who did he give to? Or the man who had been alive and complained about having cast the wrong fetus all his life, had already made up for the vacancy and walked into the ancestors of soldiers like Fengshui Temple and Jinwu Mountain, and was in the same stable situation as Feng Anti? In fact, before meeting Lu Tai, Qin Pingan's memory of the sissy man had long been blurred. Apart from the deep guilt in his heart, Qin Pingan did not think too much. If it hadn't been for Lu Tai, Qin Pingan might not have said a word, and even on the way of life he would not have said much on Ning Yao, who has nothing to say. A big man with a soft voice, rough fingers and calluses on his palms, he likes to raise his orchid fingers when he speaks. But this man is very good at needlework. The shabby houses on the Longyao side and the festive paper cuts posted on the windows every year are all made by this man staying up late with the lamp and carefully cut out with scissors. The craftsmanship of the women in his hometown is not comparable to him. Qin Pingan's biggest impression is that a man who is a kiln worker is used to being bullied. He often helps people wash and sew clothes. Wearing a brass thimble on his finger, he bit off the thread under the lamp and shakes it. Good Clothes squinted and smiled. It's not wrong to say that he is like a lady. Qin Pingan can only say that he doesn't like or dislike him. Annoyance would definitely annoy him, but Qin Pingan could bear it. After all, the only thing this man could bully back then was the boy in Mud Bottle Alley who had a more pitiful background than him. Once the man took the lead and said too much. Lu Xianying happened to pass by and slapped the man around. His face was swollen like a steamed bun, and then he kicked him to the ground. If not Qin stopped by Pingan, Lu Xianying picked up an obsolete Saga on the side of the road in his hand and was about to buckle the man's head. After being blocked by Qin Pingan, Lu Xianying threw a Saga and smashed it on the ground, threatening the man who was beaten, still sitting on the ground, rubbing his stomach and rubbing his cheeks with a smile on his face. I caught it, took a knife to make you look like a flower and helped you die as a maiden's heart. Later the man really didn't dare to trouble Qin Pingan so much. At most he would say something innocently. Everyone knows that Lu Xianying is Yao Old Man's favorite apprentice. At that time, all the kiln workers knew that Lu Xianying would be the next kiln master of Long Kiln. The key is that this guy is not very old. He is tall and big and his temper is not good. He doesn't have any seriousness to start. It's just that he gets along with people on weekdays. He is joking and he is very easy to deal with. Lu Xianying is generous on weekdays and can never keep the money. The master of the flowers, so most people are unwilling to provoke Lu Xianying, who is well known and has a better aptitude to burn porcelain. In fact, the people born in a small town are not only Qin Pingan who are not living hard, who is qualified to say that they are impatient. Besides, if a person is worried about trivial things, can he have no money in his pocket and no hope for the future? Anyway, on the first day of every month, all kiln workers and apprentices can receive more or less wages from Old Man Yao. At that time no one will be bothered. Thinking of the 4 streams of rain, it is inevitable to be worried. Thinking of the miserable sissy, a little sad. Just thinking of Lu Xianying, Qin Pingan smiled again. Probably as Lu Chen said, Qin Pingan is really good at demolishing the east wall and repairing the west wall, moving things and changing locations. It may be because of poverty, not the kind of poverty who can't live a good life, but the kind of poverty who can barely survive. So Qin Pingan liked to carefully subdivide all the objects at hand when he was young and tidy them up and post them properly. What you get and what you lose are all clear. Probably because of this, in the yellow flower view of the Daquan dynasty, I felt sorry for the obsessive-compulsive disorder of the prince, who had to arrange every book neatly. Qin Pingon has hardly lost anything in his life, so he took the little treasure bottle and traveled for the first time. After losing the hairpin, he didn't even look for it. He just continued to lower his head to build a small green bamboo bookcase just with Lin. She said something and couldn't find it. Qin Pingon put away his thoughts, folded his hands and breathed lightly. When things happened in Dali capital, I really had to go to the Yang family pharmacy immediately. Lu Chen stretched his waist and yawned. Go away, Hao Su, make an appointment, don't die in the wild world, take a leisurely sword out of it and save enough military exploits. When you get to the Qingming world, remember that you must find poor Dao for a drink. With your swordsmanship and your official position in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, you can be a city lord in Bai Yujing. Spension, a radish has a pit. Recently that little boy Jiang Yunxing has made up for that fatness in Green City. It doesn't work well, but it can be said that after 100 years of being one of the posters on the 12th floor, poor Dao can really make a little effort. Qin Pingon shook his head and shook off the snow again. He slowly got up, patted his green shirt and asked with a smile, Lu Chen, how about we do business? Lu Chen stopped immediately and agreed without saying anything. Okay. Qin Pingon turned to look at Ning Yao. She nodded, raised her eyes and looked into the distance, raising her brows, just intent. Qin Pingon looked at the other side of the city and asked with a smile in his heart, Sect Master Qi? Qi Tingji nodded and said, then try to engrave one more character. I will do what Senior Zongyun missed back then. Qin Pingon asked again, Mr. Lu? Lu Ji had a rare smile and said, I'm just waiting for your words. The slender, slightly tall and thin woman de Xianxia has a thicker smile on her face. If we are lucky, we can both return alive. No need to say anything. If we can only come back alive alone, in this city, and pour a pot of wine for the other party. Qin Pingon agreed with a smile. Lu Chen looked leisurely. Qin Pingon asked Qi Tingji first or asked Lu Ji first. There is a knowledge of human affection and sophistication hidden here. Lu Ji would definitely agree, but Qi Tingji would not. If you ask Lu Ji first, you won't be authentic. Qi Tingji will not agree and he will be like a lost sword, immortal and suzerain. It was just that Lu Chen had a small accident. Not only did Qi Tingji promise to play the sword, but he also seemed to have the intention. After Qi Tingji left the Great Wall of Jianqi at the beginning, the sky was high and the earth was wide and there were no constraints. He finally stubbed his mind and gave up the plan of being the #1 person in the colorful world, and stood firm in the Howren world. Today, if he chooses to follow everyone out of the city to hand his sword, life or death is uncertain. No one dared to say that he would be able to leave the wild world alive. As for the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, once the sect master and chief envoy were lost, why would he ride Juechen in the Howren world? Maybe it was a sect of Kendo in that Nan Pasuojo. Lu Chen asked curiously, Old Sword Immortal Qi, why do you want to do this? It doesn't seem to be in line with your usual style of action. Qi Tingji smiled without giving an answer. In Lu Chen's eyes he saw the young and handsome old sword fairy standing on the head of the city. He was slender and handsome, dressed in the same color as snow, and wearing a black sheath sword at his waist. The Great Wall of Sword Qi was indeed a handsome man. Probably this is the sword repair of Jianqi Great Wall. If you need to be reasonable in doing things, do what you do with the sword. As for the 2 sword repairmen on the battlefield, Aoyang is a foreigner and he is still a foreigner. The hidden official who was about to rush to the battlefield, Qin Pingon, was also a foreigner. Qi Tingji, as the oldest local sword repairman on the Great Wall of Sword Qi, I should treat it as a toast to all the foreign sword repairmen who died here. Qin Pingon finally asked, what did the criminal officer say? Hao Su folded his arms around his chest and said, it's good in advance. If you have military exploits, you can pick up your head and give it to me so that you can deal with the Confucian temple. The favor you owe you will be returned to the Qingming world. If you are willing to agree to it, I will follow you through this encounter. The criminal officer should be incompetent. I am still a sword repairman after all. So rest assured, as long as the sword is out, life and death are not considered. Qin Pingon nodded and said, no problem. Because Lu Ji had no words to say, he roughly guessed the truth about the great sword fairy of Fengxue Temple. He raised his head and glanced at the flying snow in the sky. Wei Jin seemed to think of the winter when he was young in his hometown, the young sword Xiantai Fengxue appear. Wei Jin stretched out his hand to hold the cross-knee-long sword and said, add me and make sure not to hold back. Qin Pingon shook his head, you are not enough for the time being. Although Wei Jin was a sword repairman in the fairyland, This trip to the barren hinterland was not suitable, not suitable. Qin Pingan's words at the moment seemed to tell Wei Jin that Chao Jun could not enter the summer palace. It was not bad. Chao Jun couldn't help but fight the injustice for the great sword Immortal of Fengxue Temple, and said in his heart, Qin Pingan is a level lower than you, has the face to say such things? Wei Jin didn't seem to care at all. From holding the sword with one hand to pressing the sword with both hands, it was tantamount to giving up that plan. Chao Jun said with anxious eyes, Wei Jin, what's the matter with you when you come to Qin Pingan? You don't have to be hard-hearted in words and actions. Wei Jin answered the wrong question and said, I was wrong before, but you can actually go to the summer palace. Chao Jun's eyes lit up. Wei Jin added, anyway, there is already a Miyu at the bottom. If you go to the summer palace, he will definitely follow you. Chao Jun doubted. That Mi stopped his waist. He was extremely stern in the old dragon city, and his deeds were very impressive. In his early years in the summer palace he was so miserable. Wei Jin nodded and said, it's worse than you think. In the end I can only hide in Chunban's high. The table is by the door and I will be the door every day. Chao Jun looked at Wei Jin with a smile on his face and sighed, a little envious of fellow villagers like Wei Jin and Qin Pingan, who became the hometown of the local sword repairman of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Wei Jin smiled and said, this Great Wall of Sword Qi is the best river and lake I have ever traveled. Wei Jin paused for a moment and then said, the only flaw is that the drinks here are rather boring. Lu Qin supported the lotus crown on his head, restrained his smile and whispered softly, you can think about something good before you go. Would you be a little impulsive if you act like this? Qin Pingan smiled and said, young man, don't be sullen. Lu Qin slapped the crown heavily and then realized, yes, I forgot to ask how to do this transaction. I suffered a little bit. I temporarily borrowed Lu Qin from his fist and swordsmanship, and Lu Qin only temporarily lent me his Daofa. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Teacher Lu, this little thing can't you trouble you? Lu Qin looked shocked and said, use boxing and swordsmanship to change the way 2-for-1. Will you suffer too much? Qin Pingan smiled and said, if you see your skills patiently, you will suffer a loss and repay you. Lu Qin nodded, deeply agreeing. Qin Pingan turned his head and looked at Lu Qin with a serious expression and said, 1 yard goes to 1 yard. Daoist Lu, there is something, thank you. After learning boxing and practicing sword, whenever he mentioned Lu Qin he would call him by his first name. Serving as a hermit returning to his homeland mostly called a Lu Zhangjiao. In fact, when he was a teenager Qin Pingan always referred to Lu Qin as Lu Daochang. Lu Qin smiled and didn't say anything. He just lifted up the sleeves of the two Taoist robe, and the breeze swayed and rolled up snowflakes. It seems that Cui Dongshan, a student of Qin Pingan, likes to name one of his sleeves, Beat Ben Chu. The poor Tao is not the case, willing to name a sleeve, Beat the smart place in the world. Lu Qin looked up at the sky and muttered, Qin Pingan, don't forget the moon is like day in Nanhua City, and the 12 jade buildings are not my hometown. My hometown is this vast world. Ning Yao squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. How I make swords in the wild world, you can't control the saint of ceremony and the Confucian temple. Lu Qin reminded, everyone before leaving, let the poor say a word, pour cold water untimely, the family of the wild world is not thin, maybe you will encounter a few very strange gods and strangers. Qin Pingan, Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji, Hao Su, the 5 swordsmen, they are very tacit, knowingly smile and they are silent. To look down on the wild world is to look down on the great wall of sword Qi that has stood here for thousands of years. How can it be so? How can it be so? Lu Qin stretched out his hand to help Daoguan, and he got together to bully the outsider. The old master he saw the scene at the bottom of the city and was deeply moved by the Confucian temple who sits in the sky curtain to accompany the saints. Until this moment the old master really understood what a hidden official is. Even on the side of the Confucian temple, almost every saint, Academy's Saint Wine and Academy's Mountain Chief would look up the secret files and review the experience. He felt that he knew enough about this young man. It turned out that it was not the truth. It's so far. Don't talk about Qin Pingan's Taoist companion Ning Yao. The old sword Immortal Qi Tingji, who only talks about the engraving on the head of the city, was born with a great background, but he has never regarded the Great Wall of Sword Qi as his hometown. There is also the criminal Hao Su who rarely shows his face and kills the ascended monks. These few people seem to pay more attention to Qin Pingan's hermit status than the monks in the world. Lu Qin suddenly said, Right, I'm in a hurry, I just remembered something. Qin Pingon, Miss Ning, and of course the criminal officer. Do you know the true identity of Greatsword Immortal Zhang Lu Dao Zhen Foot? Haosu shook his head. He knows how he is a criminal officer. He is estimated to be overwhelmed with blood if he signs up for his own number in Feishing City. Qin Pingon and Ning Yao looked at each other and shook their heads. Obviously, Ning Yao did not hear any additional statements about Zhang Lu on the side of all the elders, and Qin Pingon did not find any secret files about Zhang Lu in the Summer Palace. Ning Yao only knows that Zhang Lu is more than 500 years old. He has excellent sword training skills and is a very good friend with his parents. Zhang Lu and Liang are also very close friends, even if they have experienced the 13th battle. Zhang Lu's reputation on the Great Wall of Jianqi is not bad. You can drink and chat with anyone, but Zhang Lu doesn't seem to be particularly close to anyone. Lu Chen rubbed his eyebrows and said with a headache, Qin Pingon, you never thought, why did the boss sword immortal let Zhang Lu guard the gate at the Fallen Mountain? The relationship between Zhang Lu and the former hermit Xiao Dang is inconsistent and congenial, isn't it? The eldest sword immortal can't see Zhang Lu's hatred of Howren's world? Besides, Zhang De Jiangxian's temper and never hides these things. Even if Zhang Lu rebelled against the Great Wall of Sword Qi, why did Zhang Lu stay there? At the site of the ruins of inverted Xian Mountain, he did not move his nest for half a step, guarding the gate from beginning to end? Zhang Lu did not leave until the wild demon race exited Howren like a tide? Qin Pingon wondered, could it be that Zhang Lu didn't just make up for his merits by wearing sins? Are there other secrets? Unexpectedly, Lu Chen shook his head and said, Zhang Lu was just a gatekeeper. It is true to betray the Great Wall of Sword Qi and to do things honestly is true. Qin Pingon frowned. Before he only knew that Zhang Lu was a native of exile Xianxia. When she was in the middle five there was a Daoist companion. After she died in the battle, Zhang Lu never married another wife and even collected disciples. In terms of the matter he never opened his branches and leaves, but Zhang Lu taught the young swordsman sword skills very casually and did not hide himself, but he did not have any status as a master or apprentice. Zhang Lu's saber is called a mountain rhinoceros, and the scabbard is covered with black scales. It is said that this great sword immortal captured a jade innocent demon clan during his hunting journey in the wild world in his early years. For the scabbard. After that there were only a few words left in the archives of the Summer Palace. It seems that Zhang Lu had been closer to Jianfeng and Yifeng in his early years, because he was proficient in the crafting of refining objects, and his identity was a bit like a supervisor. Regarding this matter, after Qin Pingon entered the Summer Palace and looked through the archives, it is not surprising because before he left the upside-down mountain in his early years, Zhang Lu not only helped Ning Yao send the dragon-cutting platform to Ning Yao, but also the golden robe. Zhang Lu helped to show the blindfold. At that time, Zhang Lu said that he had sought the help of an expert from the Fulu school of the upside-down mountain, and the Taoist intercepted a few beards as a reward. From a memorial to Xianxia 3 more patterns were peeled off and blended into the cord, so Qin Pingon made it. In the end, Zhang Lu even taught Qin Ping an extra refining formula. Lu Chen helplessly reminded, Zhang Lu admires that Suzy very much. He is also good at refining objects, especially bow making. If I remember correctly, there are still a few hidden in the spring house of Feishing City. A good bow that has been in the dust for a long time, even if the rank is extremely good, can only end up in ash. There is no way it is pure sword repair who is still willing to use the bow. Qin Pingon thought for a while. Suzy is heroic, likes to drink. There was Yunjiu Tianlu also. I have this, is it not heaven? And Shuozi directly said that the drinker is the Milo of heaven. But these are all additions. Qin Pingon sighed, raised his hands and rubbed his cheeks vigorously. It turned out that Zhang Lu, like the old deaf child guarding the prison, was not a human monk but from a monster race. It's just that Zhang Lu's identity is a bit similar to Baize and he is accepted by Howren. Because this Tianlu is not only the name of the wine, but also a kind of beast recorded in the Shanheishu. Since ancient times, the dignitaries of the world have liked to place the statue of Tianlu in front of the tomb. The ancestors' shrine and tomb, the purpose of making the Ming dynasty peaceful. If it is Zhang Lu's choice to betray the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and the boss Zhenxian is willing to respect his choice, then the only thing Zhang Lu has to do is to promise Qin Qingdu to continue to keep the gate, like a guard. The head of the grave is general, and the final care is taken for the Jianqi Great Wall ruins like a tomb. Zhang Lu kept his promise as well. That would be pure sword repair of the Great Wall of Jianqi. It's no wonder that the two worlds were already in different camps, and Liang was still willing to face Zhang Lu with a smile and was still a good friend. Qin Pingon took a deep breath. Regardless of this, the two sides really want to meet again on the battlefield this time, and each of them puts their swords into the best of respect. Qin Pingon asked, Master Lu, how can I temporarily borrow Taoism? Lu Qin smiled and took off the lotus crown on his head, casually tossed it to Qin Pingon, the Taoist tokens of the third master of Bai Yujing, and gave it away. Qin Pingon took it with one hand. Ning Yao began to help Qin Pingon untie the updo. Qin Pingon took off the white jade hairpin and put it on his head without hesitation. Lu Qin smiled hippily and said, Take it and wear it and I will stay in it afterwards. You said it's a coincidence we both happen to be the scene of ancient traveling far away, but we said in advance that we have 14 realms of Taoism. Whether it's bad or bad, you have to bear the consequences. Forget it, you know this truth better than anyone else. Qin Pingon smiled and said, It's also a coincidence. Before the junior asked Jianbei Ju Lu Zhou Xianzong, he wore a similar style Taoist crown with a pseudonym, and the Taoist name was Invincible. Lu Qin looked from the left to the right. Good boy wearing a Taoist crown, a blue shirt and a sword on his back. The Yushu is getting closer to the wind and he muttered, Fate, fate. Qin Pingon helped the Taoist crown, turned his head and smiled. Mr. Lu, it's better to borrow a few good swords and fight side by side with Master Lu. No matter how polite you are, it will be hypocritical. The big deal can be converted into immortal money. Even if it is not returned, Master Lu will definitely come to ask for it. Lu Ji was accustomed to using the standard long sword cast by Jian Feng. But this time, to be careful, it's safer to borrow a few good swords from Lu Qin. Lu Qin was dumbfounded. Huh. Pang Dao thinks he can be considered a shameless person. Qin Ping, and you can even better. On the side of the city next door, Lu Ji has stretched out his hand. Well, you are welcome to come to ask for debts after Master Lu is welcome. The Dragon Elephant Sword Sect is at the seaside of Nan Pasua Island. It is easy to find. Lu Qin said again. Although the hometown of the poor is awe-inspiring in the world, it is not possible to come if you want. The rules of the Saint of Rituals are left there. You two are determined to be a pitfall and a misunderstanding, right? Lu Qin sighed and had to raise a sleeve and fumbled through it with one hand as if digging through the treasure house. Qin Pingon reminded, Master Lu, anyway, he is going to give it away so he can just grit his teeth and be more generous. Otherwise he will look down on Master He. Lu Qin checked the many treasures in the universe in his sleeves and said, Borrow, not send. Finally, Lu Qin took out a sword box the size of a palm and one jumped in place, leaped high and threw it to Lu Ji from a distance, shouting, Mr. Lu, save some use. Lu Ji caught the sword box and said, It depends on your mood. Lu Qin finally asked a question. Qin Pingon, if we were here, would we accidentally fall into that person's calculations? Qin Pingon said indifferently, So what? I am still me, we are still us, what should be done still has to be done. Lu Qin nodded. Then there is really nothing wrong with me. I will set up a big world right away, so next before we go on our way you have to get used to it for a while and sharpen the knife and not chop wood by mistake. It's the truth, you know best. As he spoke, Lu Chen's figure dissipated, turned into a rainbow light, swept into the lotus crown, and the vision between the heavens and the earth was so full that the wind and snow in a radius of thousands of miles stopped suddenly. The next moment, all those who have fallen between the heavens and the earth, the snow disappeared even more, like a majestic snow that passed the world from the future. If Lu Qin blended into the Yin with the crown of Taoism, it was a boat that was not tied to the road. Then the current Qin Pingon is a kind of mysterious Dao manifestation. Ning Yao stood still and didn't care. The criminal officer Hao Su on the side tilted his shoulders subconsciously, and an ascendant sword repairman who was extremely powerful felt a little uncomfortable. Hao Su couldn't help turning his head to look at the strange Qin Pingon. The young man in the blue shirt, long gown and cloth shoes turned into a simple and elegant blue robe. Still carrying a knight sword but an extra lotus crown. Qin Ping's knees slightly bent so that half of the Hedao city head shuddered, but he straightened his waist quickly as if he was carrying a world of heaven and earth, but he was relieved. Just looking up from a distance, I saw the wild battlefield where the secrets of heaven were chaotic in an instant. I couldn't see the real battle situation, it was obscured by the rising sky, but I could see the outline of the mountains and rivers over there. There is both A Liang's sword intent and the sword aura of the brother. Among them are mixed with earth-shattering spells and smashing, colorful magical powers. Qin Pingon said solemnly, "Everyone then go to the wild hinterland together." Dressed in a blue color, he took the lead in Huahong to leave the city. Ning Yao followed closely behind with a sword light like a rainbow. House's sword accompanies him, swiftly turning. On the other side of the city, Qi Tingji, who was covered in snow, was 1,000 miles away from the city in an instant, and Lu Ji walked with him. Two of them passed through the gate of the remains of inverted Xianshan. One was Xianxia and Daizhong, who left Yulongzong ferry with Yu Jian, and the other was Jinxiu, who did not take the intercontinental ferry to the Great Wall of Jianqi. It was Yu Jian who left Tongyi's Hao. It wasn't that they didn't want to take a ferry for a long journey, but because they were unhappy because of this. At that time, a Fuyazu ferry that docked at the shore after hearing that they were the Tongyi's Hao sword repairs, they drove directly. People put down a sentence and asked them how to go to the Great Wall of Jianqi. If it weren't for the blockade of a female sword repairer in the team, it would be fatal on the spot. This Tong Yezhou Jianxiu, who had closed the mountain but went out for a long journey, was precisely Yu Exin Wang Shizi and Li Wanyong, who was the rebellious sword repair of the younger generation of Tong Yezhong in the past. As the only female sword repairer Yu Exin, she wore a golden shirt, dress and robe, and a Xianxia skirt with a dragon girl and fairy dress, and a pair of embroidered shoes with a blessed land of flowers. Li Wanyong carrying the long sword Qi Zhuan. This trip to the Great Wall of Sword Qi was mainly to see the left and right sides. There are also Du Yen and Qin Shuihu. Except for Wang Shizi, who is an enshrined identity, the rest are all direct sword repairs from Tongye Zongzu Shirtang. They floated down the city at about the same time as Qin Sanqiu and Daizhong. As a result, I only saw the 5 long lines of sword light drawn between the world and the earth after the 5 people traveled together. In the back alleys of daily capital city, Zhou Haijing used the pure innocence of a martial artist to pull it, like a fishing rod, driving the piece of clothing thrown out of the yard back into his hands. The eyes of the 2 teenagers at the door were shining brightly. This foreigner aunt is really a master with unparalleled knowledge. She really needs to serve her well. Maybe she can learn a few real skills. Zhou Haijing looked at the green shirt guest outside the door. She regretted not being on the Taoist temple, and asked a few more questions about Qin Pinyin. It's just where she thought this guy will follow all the way here. For no reason. Are you a sword fairy on the mountain? Are you full to support? Zhou Haijing continued to collect the clothes on the clothes rail, turning around and smiling. Sect Master Qin is so leisurely, he is willing to come to such a place. Chicken and dog smell bad, right? The 2 teenagers at the door immediately swept their heads and looked at the man. He can't tell they are still people with status and status. Metropolitan? Isn't it the same as the sect leader and rudder, but looks more like a teacher, not like a guy with a gun and a stick? Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's okay, just get used to it." Su Lang, the green bamboo sword immortal of the Yuanyu realm, the 2nd class of the Xing department, worshipped the Wuxia, and Dali accompanied the army monk. Zhou Haijing, a martial artist at the top of the mountain. Of course, from a worldly perspective, she is still a good-looking woman. Everyone's words and deeds are like a journey out of the body. Every self in the eyes of others is an outside body of the Yang God. Qin Pingon knew why she knew her identity and still behaved so aggressively. Zhou Haijing seemed to be talking about a truth. She is a woman. You are a sword fairy man on the mountain, so don't come here to look for it. Before meeting, Zhou Haijing discovered that De Le Geliang and the young novice monks from the Translation Bureau were in awe of this person, from the bottom of their hearts, and couldn't do anything fake. As for Su Lang, he was even more afraid. Qin Pingon, Lord of Luopa Mountain, Master of Sect, Sword Fairy. He is also an unknown master of martial arts. The reason is very simple, because he is Pei Qian's master, but Zhou Haijing can't see the depth of martial arts and the level of martial arts for the time being. He looks like a golden martial artist. I don't know if it is hidden. But the man in front of him was indeed gentle and polite. Even Zhou Haijing, who had a critical eye, had to admit that this sword fairy was indeed brilliant. However, the human heart is separated from the belly, and the good skin is so generous. God knows if there is a belly of bad water hidden. Zhou Haijing asked, "Is something really wrong?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "It's really something." Zhou Haijing sighed, "Then come in and talk. I am a big girl who is a yellow flower, and I saw her neighbors in the neighborhood. It will be difficult to find a good person to marry." Qin Pingon thanked him. After crossing the threshold, the house was just as big. Except for the courtyard, there was a main hall and 2 side houses, one of which was still a stove. A set of poorly crafted white porcelain tea sets was placed on the table. Zhou Haijing smiled and said, "I can only treat guests poorly. Let alone there is no good wine, there is no tea. Do you want boiled water?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's okay, I just drink a bowl of white water." For this kind of small house, Qin Pingon actually has a natural closeness because it is very similar to his hometown. After Qin Pingon took a seat, he took the bowl of water and asked straightforwardly, "Mr. Zhou had a feast with that Yu Hong, and did he have a grudge? If it is blindly oblique, it will make people suspicious." In the early years of Desui Mountain Cliff Academy, Cui Dongshan once asked 2 seemingly similar questions, hoping that this nominal gentleman would help. For so many years, especially on the Jianqi Great Wall, Qin Pingon has been thinking about this question, but it is difficult to give an answer. Cui Dongshan's 2 questions are about how to pursue a correct result in the wrong way. Right or wrong? Then, with the wrong method, an extremely rare correct result was reached. Wrong, is there any mistake? 2 questions with the same context. The latter is of course more difficult to answer than the former. Qin Pingon hopes that today's visit will give Cui Dongshan, a student, a long overdue, half answer. At most it is half the answer. What can Qin Pingon teach the so-called master student? It seems that Cui Dongshan can't be taught anything. Only over time, Qin Pingon really regarded himself as Cui Dongshan's husband. Zhou Haijing laughed dumbly and put down the water bowl. Sect Master Qin said and laughed. "I am a fisherman, a rural village ant, and a master of martial arts like Senior Yu. Even if I burn a lot of incense every day, I can't get half a coin." She continued, "By the way, Sovereign Qin should stop taking a mouthful of Mr. Zhou. Sounds awkward. Just call him by name and you can call Miss Zhou. Anyway, we will not be too different in age, just as one. People of seniority are fine." Seeing that the young sword fairy was silent, Zhou Haijing asked curiously, "Sect Master Qin asked what this does? Are you friends with the old you? Or are you friends of that kind of friends?" Zhou Haijing seemed to have realized it suddenly and said with a look of surprise, "Is it possible that Sect Master Qin has learned boxing with Yu Hong?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "I haven't heard of Yu Hong before." Zhou Haijing joked, "Then what you are doing here, you won't be surprised? How do I think Sect Master Qin doesn't look like this kind of person? But I heard that the gods on the mountain look at the beauty of women and the men under the mountain. Beauty is totally a world." Qin Pingon said, "This time I came here uninvited and took the liberty to visit. It was an unsympathetic request. If Miss Zhou is unwilling to answer, I will not make it difficult. But if I am willing to say something about the past, even if I owe Miss Zhou a favor. In the future, whenever there is something Miss Zhou finds it tricky, so she only needs to send a message to Luopa Mountain by Feijian, and I will be there on call. Of course, the premise is that what Miss Zhou asks me to do is not against my heart." "Sounds great, in fact." Zhou Haijing tutade, "I almost thought that now not at home but still in the small Taoist temple of Gudalu." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Understood, I will leave after drinking this bowl of water, so I won't embarrass Miss Zhou." Seeing the man in the green shirt holding a bowl and drinking water, Zhou Haijing said, "Sect Master Qin is really a particular person." Qin Pingon doubted, "Why do you say this?" Zhou Haijing smiled and raised the white bowl. "It's nothing, replace wine with tea." Qin Pingon lifted the bowl and took a sip. Zhou Haijing saw in her eyes her face was full of smiles. Obviously he was born into a wealthy family and he was able to do it, and it must be natural to not let others feel abrupt. Probably this is the so-called exquisiteness. Local aristocrats, wealthy and nobles, Zhou Haijing after learning boxing traveled to various countries and still saw some. There are many embroidered pillows and there are many people who are not a thing and there are many poets and books. Yes, but not many. It's just that this one in front of me, under a blue shirt and long gown, those spotless cloth shoes, revealed the secret. In this shabby place full of chicken dung and dog feces pigpen, it is worthy of being a sword fairy who comes and goes like the wind, without feet touching the ground. These people have some contempt in their hearts, and the contempt in their hearts is actually very difficult to hide. In Zhou Haijing's view, it is not as low as the dogs on their faces. These lofty genealogists, the place of cultivation in the mountains, the place where they lived for a long time, which one is not in the place where the white clouds of the meal and the dew? Zhou Haijing suddenly asked a question. If Sect Master Qin is chosen, Would he rather drink white water than crude tea? Qin Pingon said, "It doesn't matter if you tell the truth." Zhou Haijing tapped his finger on the white bowl and said with a smile, "Really? There are also some people who are accustomed to living a life of poverty and poverty. They simply don't have anything. They have 2 sleeves and a breeze. They say they are safe and happy, but they can't stand the blunt knives that need to deal with trivial matters every day." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "What is there to fool girl Zhou?" After drinking a bowl of water, Qin Pingon was about to stand up and say goodbye. Zhou Haijing sighed. Sect Master Qin still seems to be a little unwilling. "If you leave, I won't have to be more flustered, so I might as well say something straight, open the skylight to speak up, maybe I will change my mind. But after speaking, we really want the water in the well to stay out of the river." Qin Pingon nodded. "Then I will say a few blunt words and will not go in circles with Miss Zhou." Zhou Haijing smiled sweetly. Walking alone in the rivers and lakes, life and death can be bearish, not too much care. Sect Master Qin does not need to be like this. The more polite and courteous it makes me worry about the weasel New Year's greetings. Qin Pingon smiled. "Although I don't know how Guling and Song Su talked with Ms. Zhou, I'm sure that Ms. Zhou will finally agree to join the Dolly branch because I need an amulet. I think I've killed one. Yuhong is not enough, it's not a big revenge." In the previous questioning boxing at the Fire God Temple Ring, Ms. Zhou's showing of weakness was very measured. Generally, the 9-level martial arts can't see it, but I can see some clues. Furthermore, only the sachet on Miss Zhou is your own item. Because if I remember correctly, according to the custom of the fishermen on the seaside in Miss Zhou's hometown, when a woman wears an embroidered swallow pattern on the flower letter period, the silk sachet is a woman, indicating to outsiders that she is a woman. I believe Miss Zhou can see that I am also a pure martial artist, so it is clear that a woman who wants to be among the 9 martial artists at the age of 50, no matter how talented she is, at least needs 1 or 2 introductory scores when she is young. Afterwards, on the way to martial arts, you will meet 1 or 2 people who help teach boxing and feed the boxing. Miss Zhou is not the same as Yi Yunyun from Tongyi's Hao. You are a fisherman. Miss Zhou has no detours. You have a good foundation in the 9 realms. You are far more hopeful than Yu Hong to reach the end. Naturally, you have to pass a halfway teacher biography. With such a good future in martial arts, she did not hesitate to change her life with Yu Hong, even to seek more. After arriving in the capital, Miss Zhou acted cautiously. She was in that lane, and before meeting Gudealu and the others, Miss Zhou in the carriage, even more, he did not hesitate to inspire a mouthful of Wufu pure innocence, hurting the internal organs so as to pretend to hemate blood. Zhou Haijing just has an expression that I can't understand no matter what you say, just like listening to a storyteller. Qin Pingon said, "I won't mix up the grievances between Miss Zhou and Yu Hong, just want to know what happened in the early years." Zhou Haijing gently rotated the white bowl. "Small things. A little bitterness, I can't say more to an outsider." Qin Pingon thought for a while. Since Miss Zhou likes to do business, she is also good at business, and the way of doing business is awe-inspiring, so let's just change it. The branch of the Dolly Earth branch is under my control for the time being. As long as Miss Zhou is in charge, you will still be arrogant about your grievances with Yu Hong, but I can guarantee that in addition to the earthly branch and the 2 parts of courtesy and punishment, you will not be nosy. If it was said that Zhou Hai mirroring heard stories from Mr. Shu, listening to this Qin Jiangxian's big words at this moment is more like listening to the heavenly book. You guy really deserves his surname Song. Or treat yourself as that national teacher Tui Yang. You are in charge of the Dolly Earth branch for the time being. Now the entire Howren world knows one thing, the mountain monks on Aquarius Island, who can't hold their heads up the mountain dynasty. Zhou Haijing held back a smile, waved his hand and changed his name. "Mr. Qin, we really can't talk together. Can I finally ask a question? How are you a martial artist?" Even though Zhou Haijing knew that the sword fairy in Qingshan was the master of Pei Qian, who was just a martial artist, and Qing was better than Blue because of Blue, and there were more cases where the disciples were more talented than the master. The master led the door to practice in the individual, just like the master of Yu Hong, just a golden martial artist in the Zhuang dynasty where swordsmanship is like a cloud, very inconspicuous. As for herself, even more so. The person who teaches boxing is a 6-level martial artist. Of course, at that time she was still young and treated him as a god. In the eyes, in the heart, in the face, in the eyebrows, it was him. Drinking, eating, walking, I think about it. Only by practicing hard can you forget a moment. Qin Pingon said, "It's not too different from Miss Zhou's realm." Before Zhou Haijing could speak to rush people, Qin Pingon got up, clasped his fist and said, "I promise I won't bother Ms. Zhou again." Zhou Haijing got up and laughed. "That's good, but then again I really don't believe that the master who is nicknamed Jing Qingming will be a wicked person. So today's chat, if I offend Mr. Qin, will be great. Please save me a bit, forgive me. We won't meet anymore. It's okay to curse Zhou Haijing's ignorance in my heart or mouth." She found that the man seemed quite happy after hearing these words. It seems that Qin Pingon is really proud of that disciple Pei Qian. The two city boys at the door never left. The tall young man shouted, "Auntie Zhou, if that person dared to make a fuss and shout, Wan Yan and I will copy the guy immediately." Zhou Haijing turned her head and said angrily, "Auntie, what auntie calls sister?" The tall young man laughed and said, "As long as Aunt Zhou is not angry, don't say calling your sister, calling your aunt and grandma to calling your sister will succeed." The delicate young man named Wan Yan grinned. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at the lanes at the entrance. He didn't know the lotus roots in his early years. Inside that small county town, the future master of Nanyuan Guogua teacher and Yuzhini, the first climber to cultivate immortals, were young. Is it also such a slightly confused look? Zhou Haijing glanced at the man's eyebrows and expression. She was a little surprised. "Good guy, the Tao is not shallow. My old lady will look at it a few more times. Maybe she'll have the Tao." Now she regrets that she is too ignorant about the scenery of the mountains on Aquarius Island. If it weren't for Su Lang's reminder, she couldn't believe that the guy who gave way in the alley is the young sword fairy who is now the most popular in Aquarius Island. It is true that every time Zhou Haijing thinks about the expenses of those beautiful flowers, she makes her heart and soul tremble. It is said that there are only a few or a dozen snowflakes, but as long as it is converted into real gold and silver, especially into a string of copper coins, Zhou Haijing puts on a nightgown, and just finds a piece of cloth to cover his face. The thought of going to the mountain to fight a house and robbery is gone. Qin Pingon left and Zhou Haijing went to the gate of the courtyard. The tall young man laughed in a low voice. "Sister Zhou, this guy looks pretty good. He looks like a gentleman." "Why, because he doesn't have any money in his pocket. I didn't look at him." Zhou Haijing smiled and said, "He doesn't have any money? Hi oil, you have such a good look. No wonder you steal money on me and miss such a real rich man." Gao Yu turned his head and looked at that man's back. "Rich? Can't it?" The delicate young man suddenly trot all the way, caught up with Qin Pingon, turned sideways and almost walked against the wall and said softly, "Sect Master Qin, my name is Wan Yan." Qin Pingon turned his head and smiled. "The Wan Yan who leaned on Ma Wan Yan?" The young man nodded vigorously, hesitated for a moment, blushing and asked, "Do you know how to fist?" "Know a little." "Can you teach it to outsiders?" "No. I can give money. If the money is not enough, I owe it first and I will pay it back, I can swear." Qin Pingon still shook his head and did not agree to the boy. The young man looked sad. "Those martial arts masters pile frame, we learned it is useless. I heard that we still need boxing book, meridian and so on. We have never read a book, can't learn the real thing. In fact, there are still some things that I can't say. I have been practicing with Gao Yu for several years. It's hard to say whether it has risen or not. It's easy to get hungry anyway. When I get hungry, I have to steal money from the street. No one wants to accept two paupers in the martial arts halls of all sizes in the capital." Qin Pingon asked, "Why do you want to learn boxing?" Wan Yan said, "I won't be bullied. It's easier to earn money after learning the skill." Zhou Haijing, who was leaning against the door, shouted with the young sword fairy, "It's too late to learn boxing. I ran into it 7 or 8 years earlier. Maybe I would still be willing to teach them three-legged cat kung fu. Now I have taught boxing. It will hurt them just because of their temper. They will get mixed up in the world and sooner or later they will be beaten to death in martial arts fights. It is better to be a thief in peace with little ability and less trouble." Gao Qiqiang exclaimed, "Sister Zhou, don't look down on people. Wan Yan has a very good mind. He just doesn't have the money to study, otherwise he can get a jinsher at random." The delicate young man, with a shy smile, scratched his head and looked a little uncomfortable. The two were about to reach the end of the alley and Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "Why did you ask me to learn boxing? Your sister Zhou is also a member of the rivers and lakes, so why bother to stay closer?" Wan Yan said, "I think Mr. Qin is a master." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Yes." Wan Yan immediately changed his words, "I am also a master." The boy turned his head and smiled apologetically to Zhou Haijing. Zhou Haijing was amused. Qin Pingon couldn't help but said, I'm a master, how can I tell? Wan Yen said, momentum. Sect Master Chen walks and talks not like us but like Aunt Zhou. Qin Pingon gave a hum, nodded and said, it is a good habit to observe the world carefully. It will make you bypass a lot of bumps and bumps unintentionally. It's just this kind of thing that we can't prove in ourselves. You should be the experience of someone who has passed by. Confucianism speaks of being cautious, while Buddhism speaks of self-certification, but they all mean the same thing. It's just that it doesn't make sense to tell a teenager this. I have to admit that a lot of truths actually have thresholds. In addition, we must also pay attention to whether they are willing to learn and willing to listen. Qin Pingon stopped at the alley and smiled with the young man. Your Aunt Zhou is a good talker, please beg her more and then be clever and find something to do on weekdays such as taking the initiative to buy wine for Aunt Zhou. It's certainly not difficult to learn some physical fitness skills. Wan Yen nodded. Understood, you still have to spend money. Qin Pingon laughed, walked out of the alley and left straight away. Zhou Haijing curled his lips. Wan Yen stopped for a long time and when he could no longer see the blue shirt he ran back to his good friends Gao Yu and Zhou Haijing. Zhou Haijing said, I advise you to give up on the matter of learning boxing. The reason is that you two are not black enough. Gao Yu was puzzled and asked, isn't it enough? Zhou Haijing rolled his eyes, turned and walked into the house, closing the courtyard door. Glancing at the white bowl on the table, she only hoped that this bookish sword Immortal, Pei Qian's master, would really do what he said and stop pestering herself. Zhou Haijing sat on the threshold of the main house, looking at the courtyard door outside. The fishermen by the sea, exposed to the sun all year round, the sea breeze and the young girls fishing for pearls, most of them have dark skin like charcoal and they can see where they are going. There used to be a man from a village who stopped and settled in a seaside village to help fishermen dry sea salt and build dams. And her hometown near the sea has been passed down from generation to generation by her ancestors, saying that it is the place where the sun rests with eyes closed and wakes up with eyes open. Back then the poor girl was like a flower mirror. Qin Pingon gradually walked away muttering to himself, at the same time the flowers and fruits. In the front yard of the Yang family pharmacy, Su Dian and Shi Lingshan continued to look after the shop. There was no business anyway. Su Dian left the front yard and went to sit in the backyard. Even if the master was not there, she was still behaving. She did not dare to sit on the steps of the main house or sit on the bench. Shi Lingshan raised the curtains, looked at the senior sister and sighed. He was very sad. Jing Dafeng the bastard. I heard this old bachelor's bad idea a few years ago. When I met Yu Lu at a battlefield site in the old Zhuing dynasty, I said that I was not actually Su Dian's junior, it was her. His son. After hitting that, he received a punch and didn't say anything. The senior sister didn't give him a good face anymore. Even to this day he was not happy to talk to him. Shi Lingshan asked softly, Senior sister, is there something on my mind? Su Dian didn't seem to hear it. Shi Lingshan asked in a low voice, Sister, do you miss master? Su Dian didn't turn his head, just said, Look at the shop. Shi Lingshan groaned, happily, pity and ran back to the front yard. The senior sister said 4 words to herself today. Su Dian is indeed thinking about people, but not her most respected master, but her uncle. There used to be a dragon kiln with a yellow-faced and thin child. He was so dirty that he couldn't tell a boy or a girl, but no one would care anyway. Her uncle, because he couldn't stand the eyes of neighbors and those who pierced his backbone, he sold the field for a low price and ran to work as a potter. But the uncle did not tell anyone about their relationship for her to get better. Uncle only asked Master Yao privately to ask her to do some trivial things over there, so she stayed over there. Then the uncle died. She felt that it would be better to stay in the small town and scold someone to death. It is better to beat someone to death and then stab them to death by herself. When Su Dian thought of this, he raised the back of his hand and rubbed his eyes. In those years, occasionally my uncle drank and said something to her heart, probably because she never said anything. Every time she just listened silently, so she mistakenly thought that she was too young to understand anything. Uncle said, looking at my eyes, it was like seeing something dirty. I know, what can I do? I can only pretend not to know. Can't escape, can't run away. Don't blame them, I asked for it. Uncle gave her a nickname which is now Rouge. In fact, she disliked it very much and even hated it all the time. When he is in a good mood, he often chants with her, Little Rouge, you are a girl and you like rouge gouache. This is the best thing. In those years, the only thing the uncle could bully was the short and thin straw shoe boy. Because that boy was too poor and was still a helpless orphan. The least promising uncle seems to be rich, face-saving and confident in his words only when he lives with the surname Chen. She had seen the guy who was a little older than her many times. He frowned slightly and pursed his mouth when he was drawing, but every time he made something he still didn't work. When my uncle came last he told her, Xiao Rouge, if something happens in the future he should go to that person Chin Pingon in Mud Bottle Alley. He will help you for sure. But don't bother others often as the frequency will be annoying. She didn't know it at the time, but it was almost her uncle's last words. Su Dian was sitting on the steps, shrinking, startled in a daze. One night in Niping Alley, a tall and thin man who changed into a clean suit, took advantage of the owner of the house, who needed to stare at the kiln fire and sneaked back to the town overnight. A dark and skinny little girl was responsible for helping her uncle keep the door out of the alley. The man stepped over the wall and entered the yard, but he hesitated for a long time, lingering, holding a rouge box in his hand. Before that, the man secretly went to the Yang's drugstore, found the old man with withdrawn disposition and bought an ointment. The reason why I was afraid of death was just because I was afraid of pain. It was ugly to hang to death. How uncomfortable it was to die by throwing water. I was afraid to die when I thought about it. This made the man more sad and sad. When a man is in a bad mood he likes to sit by the water, cut red paper, or braid the little girls who depend on each other for life. He does things except for the crops that he least likes since he was a child. At the riverside I will face the water, turning my head constantly, just like looking in a mirror, often raising my palms and gently stroking the temples. Being a kiln worker is hard work, but there is no single room to live in. A big man looking in the mirror is bumped into by others and has to suffer a lot of gossip. The person he once hated the most, perhaps no one would have thought, was not the guy who was used to bullying him, but the strawshoe boy from Mud Bottle Alley. Because when the teenager looked at him there was no mockery or even pity in his eyes, just like looking at a person. But the more Chin Pingon was like this, the more uncomfortable his sissy heart became. He wished that everyone was pickled. He would rather that young man be the same as all the kiln workers, so the more he likes to take the lead, to fan the flames of the kiln worker apprentice from Mu Ping Alley, and make the yin and yang strange. Until that day he broke into a disaster, broke the fire in the dragon kiln and hid in the forest. In fact, the boy was the first to find his trace, but he said nothing. He pretended not to see him and helped afterwards, to conceal the trail. Later he was interrupted by his legs and spent half a year recuperating in bed. In the end, the one who took care of him the most was the black charcoal boy who didn't know how to refuse others' requests. It was also during those years that he was a sissy person who often chatted with Chin Pingon, but he was very reluctant to talk. Most of the men were talking and the teenagers listening. Chin Pingon. You are a weird person, actually more weird than me, but you are really a good person. The old saying goes that good people don't live long and that good people are rewarded. What do you think? You don't know, do you? When you get older you will know that being a good person will be very hard. Occasionally, Chin Pingon would say a word or two in his heart saying that he is a good person and want to hit him, but if you are afraid of hitting Lu Xianying I don't have to do it. In the last conversation between the two, the sissy wanted to give Chin Pingon something. Sending you something is the only valuable thing I have. It's the cherished rouge box. Just like all the spirit of his life, all the good hopes for life, are hidden inside. But the boy was sitting on the threshold, shook his head and said, No. Not dirty. It's not dirty or I don't like it. I take it and it's useless. I can't sell it for money. Take it even if I'm begging you. I think it over. I can't be scolded like a girl anymore. If no one helps me keep the box of rouge I can't help but take a look. I have to look at it a few more times and then I can't help but smear a little bit. I start to miss this month's wages and then I will be called a sissy again. But in the end the boy still didn't accept the rouge box. That's why that night, the man sneaked back to the small town of Mud Bottle Alley and went over the wall to Chin Pingan's ancestral home. But in the end, Sissy didn't follow the original intention and plowed the soil to bury the rouge box. Instead she overcame the wall to the alley and hid in the alley close to the house, without facing the courtyard gate. The sissy thoughts and reasons are simple for fear of getting dirty and clean. When he walked to the door of the alley, the man took the little girl's hand and looked back. His face was full of tears, his eyes closed, and he thought to himself, I just hope that God will open his eyes. Don't look at yourself, just look at Chin Pingan and bless good people with a good reward. Listening to the words of the young bull riding boy, Chin Lingjun was stunned. He didn't understand what the name was. He had to ask, Who is the Taoist looking for? Can you say it again? Anyway, I'm just idle. Friends lead the way, the streets and alleys here in Huaihuang County. I can walk down with my eyes closed. The name of the person the Taoist outsider was looking for was so strange that he had never heard of it. The young Taoist boy laughed and said, I can find it myself. Fix it and know what the fun is. Qin Lingjun didn't care about this and first asked the green bull tentatively, This fellow Taoist, can you understand me? If you understand, just nod your head or something. After all, the young Taoist boy called Daoist before, maybe he is a good spirit in cultivation, isn't he a fellow? Seeing that the blue bull was indifferent, Qin Lingjun was completely relieved. He turned out to be a junior who hadn't gotten his resuscitation. From this it can be seen that the Dao Fa of the young man riding on the cow's back is definitely not much higher. Otherwise, the immortal mount on the top of the mountain does not have the cultivation base and supernatural powers of the 5 realms, so the immortal master is embarrassed to take it out? That's why the young Taoist boy reminded, Passenger Daoist, your mount can't run, right? If you hit a passerby, it's not good. Losing money is small and you have to go to court, especially if you hit the town. The people who are about to enter the autumn, who stayed here in the county seat and did not move their nests, will soon be very busy. Even if they collect a sum of money, they will delay the autumn harvest and suffer a bitter meal. After all, it is not beautiful. The young Dao Tong smiled and said, Didn't fellow Daoists say that in the entire Beiyue boundary, your name is very loud? Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes and said, Help friends and talk about loyalty, we can't be foolish, why should we take a bit of reason? If we really want to hit someone, that is that we are at a loss. The other party is willing to take the money for private purposes. You have no money. Of course I can pay for it. I don't want to talk about borrowing or repaying, but if someone has to drag you to the county office to reason, what can I do? The county magistrate is not my son, I just listen to whatever I say. Dao Tong nodded and said slowly, It makes sense. With only 3 characters, the young man also deliberately spoke slowly as if there was reason and reason. Qin Lingjun heard a headache, shook his head and sighed. This fellow Taoist is not very real and does not have enough Taoism so he can talk together. Dao Tong turned over and got off the back of Qing Yo and asked, Did you have a holiday with that Master Lu? Qin Lingjun laughed and said, What can I have with him? Such an old far in the sky, the realm is as high as Xinju Mountain, and the Taoism is as long as the Longshu River. The boy smiled and asked, Did you ever know who you really are? Qin Lingjun hesitated, shook his head and said, Naturally raised, no father or mother, talk about things that weren't the original. The young man stood in place and said, The statement of fellow Taoist is quite interesting. Go straight to the point of mind. Qin Lingjun was very happy. Ha, fellow Taoist, you're a Taoist priest. Why don't you say something about Buddhism and don't worry about your patriarch's guilt? Daoist, be sincere. The young man laughed and asked, The master of your family won't help you look it up and ask the ancestors? The people, for this matter, still have the genealogy of the genealogy, let alone the monks like Taoists. Light a few joss sticks and burn some paper on the side of the road. It's good to be a respect to the ancestors. Qin Lingjun couldn't help but utter his heart out again. At the beginning I was too lazy to say that since I can remember, there is no father or mother. It is good to be used to it. It will not be too sad. It is not something worth talking about. I often put it on my lips, begging for a pitiful, not a hero. My master doesn't care much about my past. He doesn't say anything when he sees me, he never asks. He only recognizes one thing and takes me home. I have to be responsible to me. Fact, it's okay. After going up the mountain, the master often travels far away, and when he comes home he doesn't care much about me. The more you do this, the more sensible I will be. What do you think is the largest mountain and water in the world? What do you want to do with this thing? There is a hammer to use it. Fellow Daoist, you tell me? Haranjusho, is it like 9 mountains emerging from the water or just a mountain just surrounded by the 4 seas? Qin Lingjun nodded when he heard the words, and he was really so interesting and laughed. The saying of fellow Taoists is also quite knowledgeable. Qin Lingjun stood on tiptoe and secretly patted a horn of ox. My house has a hill, all seasons are like spring and there are strange flowers and weeds all over the hills and plains. There are so many sweet green grasses. Qing Yo shook his head slightly as if looking at the boy in Qingyi. Qin Lingjun nodded and said with satisfaction, As soon as I hear about eating, my comprehension comes. That's a good thing. I might really practice the magic of the immortal family in the future. The boy Dao Tong smiled and didn't say anything. He just patted the green cow's back and signaled to take his temper. This time he traveled to this small town. He traced back to the source to see what is one. The monk who went to a dragon kiln from the river wanted to know how the one became one. As for the old master outside the school, he wants to know where he is going. What a young boy, Tianjun, who has been in prison for more than 10,000 years. He did not hesitate to use the of fire Wan Xiu and the of water Li Lu as concealment methods that can be discarded. In the end, he step by step, interlocking and concealing the sky, dared to really let him have no roots in a face. The new and old co-lord of the heavens will become the one and will soon reappear in the world. Qin Pingan in Ni Ping Lane, the young man who grew up eating by Jia Fan. If there is no accident after that, he will eventually become the one with the best chance. This is not the case at the beginning. Old man Yang quietly broke up that one with his own hands, and then let everyone in the town Jiazi fight for that one. Everyone is qualified to fight for this one, even if it is the reincarnation of gods like Wan Xiu and Li Lu, there is the same opportunity. Everyone has a chance, everyone has a share. Wan Xiu, Li Lu, Li Shixing, Li Baoping, Kiln Worker, Sissy Man, Xinghua Lane, Makushuan, Nipping Lane, Song Jisun, Jinlong Jigui, Li Huai, Lu Xianyang, Gukin Zhao Yu Lin Shouwan. City and Xieling. Everyone was silent, unknowingly being in this game. In addition, the Lizhu cave sky is inherently intricate and complex. Because of this, the secret is not visible and there is no trace. What's more, there is Qi Jingchun before and Cui Yang behind. Qin Lingjun looked at the young Taoist boy and asked, "What's the matter? Are you distracted? I'm still embarrassed to let me lead the way, so be polite, say where to go." Dao ancestor smiled and said, "The master of your family is very powerful. I want to see him if I have a chance." Qin Lingjun patted the young Taoist boy on the shoulder, then smiled triumphantly and said with a smile on his hips, "Daoists are talking nonsense?" An old master smiled and came to the boy in Tsing Yi, patted Qin Lingjun's head and said with a smile, "Talk to Dao ancestor, don't be big or small." Qin Lingjun patted the old master's hand with one hand. After thinking about it, forget it. They are all scholars and don't care about you. They just smiled and looked at the young Taoist boy. "You are really fellow Taoist and the name is too big. Are all homophonic with Taozu, change it, there is a chance to change it." The young Dao Tong smiled and said, "Tao ancestor is not a name, it is just a Dao number given by others, I don't think it needs to be changed." The middle-aged monk followed in the street. Qin Lingjun choked for a while, glanced at the monk in the distance, then raised his head to look at the old master with a kindly smile on his side, finally looked at the young Taoist boy. Qin Lingjun took a deep breath, thumped and knelt on the ground, his hands clasped together. Lifting up high and keeping silent, it's really not that he doesn't speak etiquette, but these three, which one is correct first? Seems to be wrong to call someone first. No matter what, if you knock 9 heads for respect, you should give 3 knocks for each person. Anyway, the patriarch of the 3 teachings, you don't have to worry about this little thing. After holding his hands, the old master said, "If you want me to see, the matter is over. Besides, for the time being, there is actually no fixed number. Leave it to the world." Dao Zu smiled. The holy master also laughed. Qin Lingjun finished gnawing his head, quietly raised his head and found that something seemed to be amiss. He didn't care about it and he knocked 9 more, no 18 beeps. The middle-aged monk looked at the plaque in Buddhist language on the archway building, and didn't ask outside. He looked at the gods and God's grave, his hands clasped together, and the Buddha sang endlessly. Daozu glanced at a room in the backyard of the Yang family pharmacy. There was a letter for Qin Pingan. There was a sentence on the letter. "Have you ever eaten enough?" The old master sighed. Qi Jingchun. Sort of coming. Chapter 850. Listening to the innermost words of the Tsing Yi boy, the middle-aged monk first said, "Let's look again." The old master smiled and said, "I think this is very good. After waiting for more than 10,000 years, why rush for a while?" Dao ancestor nodded and smiled at the green cow. "Since there is nothing wrong for the time being, you just go shopping and remember not to cross the border. There's also a big belly. Don't hold grudges about things today. Be too careful. It is a good thing to practice cultivation. Not so." Qin Yo lost that great avenue suppression and suddenly appeared in human form. He was a tall and old Taoist with a clear appearance, awe-inspiring attitude and extremely majestic. It is the old master of the Taoist temple in the East China Sea, the well-deserved of the lotus roots blessed land, Because the lotus root's blessed land is connected with the lotus cave sky, from time to time he breaks off his wrists with the Taoist ancestors to compare the level of Taoism. Lao Guanzhu is also the master behind the 4 people who created Zhou Xian and Sui right side of the inner picture scroll, and he is recognized as one of the most powerful 14-realm monks in the world. The oldest existence between heaven and earth is in the same generation as Tuotian ancestor Bai Zhe and the first rise. Regardless of age, only the Dao Ling of the years of practice, Lu Shilu of the Wenxing lineage and Zhang Lu, who has a hidden identity in the Great Wall of Jianqi, are all considered juniors. Every time the old Guanzhu goes out to travel he is like a fairy poem. What's more, in the ancient times the Bixiao cave next to Luobao Beach was invincible from the cave, able to forgive and not forgive. It didn't become a mount until it met a young human monk, and later, there was the saying of smelly bull nose in the world. Qin Lingjun raised his head slightly and glanced from the corner of his eye. Compared to the old brother Jia in Qilong Lane, he was indeed a little bit more immortal. If the old Taoist had such an appearance from the beginning, it is estimated that the Taoist ancestor of riding a bull would only be mistaken by Qin Lingjun for the fire-burning boy next to this old god, who would do some chores like looking after the Dan furnace and shaking the fan. Old Guanzhu glanced at the Tsing-yi boy who was still sitting on the ground, a brave little reptile. Qin Lingjun immediately lowered his head, moved his butt and turned his head to look away. "I can't see you, you can't see me." Lao Guanzhu smiled and said, "Friend Jingqing, the face that your master lost in Uafuti has been picked up by you." Qin Lingjun didn't lift his head, bowed his head and said dully, "It's not guilty if you don't know. If the old and I care about this little thing it won't be so fairy tale." That's how it is said, but if it weren't for the presence of the patriarch of the 3 sects, Qin Lingjun must have been busy shining his shoes on the old god's legs at the moment. As for rubbing his shoulders and back, he still has nothing to do. The height of the 2 sides is very different. I can't reach it. If I jumped up and slapped people on the shoulder, I never did this kind of thing. The old View master laughed and then his body dissipated. As the Taoist ancestor said, he wandered elsewhere. Even the Piyun Mountain and Weibo could not notice the slightest ripple. There are too many lines and veins in the town, intermittent, some have been completely cut off and some are still broken and intricate. The old masters are actually quite happy about this. The outline and guidance is the main road. If you can observe the Tao in this way you will definitely benefit a lot. Dao ancestor came from the east, riding an ox to pass through the gate. Invisibly gave the old Lizhu Dongtian a purple atmosphere, but it was temporarily invisible and it will slowly become clear in the future. There is no need to act deliberately. Wherever the Taoist ancestor walks, there is the avenue. This is still in the Haoran world. If it were in the Qingming world, all kinds of auspicious visions would be even more exaggerated. Dao law is natural. Dao ancestors did not deliberately conceal this kind of weather, but he was a guest, and because of the rules set by the ritual saint he kept it. Daozu walked to the Yang's shop, planning to sit on the bench under the eaves of the backyard. The middle-aged monk went to Tanglong Kiln where old man Yao was the master. Only the most sacred master was left standing next to Qin Lingjun, and the old master joked, "Sitting and talking don't hurt your back, so you don't want to get up?" As soon as Qin Lingjun got up, his hands and feet were soft. He sat down on the ground and said embarrassedly, "If you return to the holy master I can't stand up." The old master smiled and said, "I have become so courageous? Before I appeared I wasn't stubborn." Qin Lingjun said embarrassedly, "Bullshit, uncountable. With eyes but no beads, don't blame it." The old master said with a smile, "The monk, the spirit is all in his eyes. The mountain climbs to prove the truth and it is only in the heart." Qin Lingjun was full of emotion. The most sage master's knowledge is great. It sounds mysterious. The old master asked, "Jingqing, can you take me to Mud Bottle Alley?" When Qin Lingjun heard that it was Mud Bottle Alley he immediately jumped up. "What a problem." The old master asked in doubt, "Yeah, where is the strength now?" Qin Lingjun scratched his head. Yen Yen said, "I don't know what's going on. When I talk about my master, I'm not afraid of anything." The old master sighed and said, "About everyone will have their own backbone. Walking on the complex world, helping us to fight the whole world. Losing is suffering. Winning is stability." Taking advantage of the other 2 walking away, Qin Lingjun asked tentatively, "Otherwise, how many more heads should I give to the most holy master?" The old master waved his hand and smiled, "No need, it's annoying to hear too many kowtows. Qin Lingjun asked cautiously. The most holy master, why doesn't Wei Shanjun know that you are in the town? The boy in Tsingyi hurriedly added, Jun Wei Shan knows the etiquette very well. If it is not really something, Weibo will definitely come to see him. Personal grievances and social rules are two different things. What Weibo treats him and how Weibo treats Luopishen must be calculated separately. Besides, Weibo was actually fine with him. The old master said with a smile. Because the travel to the small town is not in the context that Dao Zhu wants people to know. Since Dao Zhu intended to do this, of course Weibo would not see the three of us. Qin Lingjun was amazed. The Taoism of Dao Zhu is high. The old master smiled and said, it's more than a high level of Taoism. I really wanted to fight before. I was also shocked. Qin Lingjun showed his true feelings and he lost his scruples. He laughed and said, if you lose, you don't lose. I know the truth. It's just that the more I talked, the lower my voice, and the stinking problem of not keeping the door open. Qin Lingjun finally changed his words and angrily. I know a hammer Master Xianxia has a lot, just treat me as if I didn't say anything. The old master didn't care. During the period, the two passed by the shop in Qilong Alley, and Qin Ling did not squint. How dare to introduce the most holy master to Brother Jia casually. The old master turned his head and looked at the Nian Sui shop and Chaotu shop. Looking at the business is pretty good. Qin Lingjun nodded. Small business, fair prices, long water flow. In fact, cannot make a lot of money, but my master handles so much fairy money, but he is very concerned about the profit and loss of this little silver and copper money, and often goes down the mountain to come here to turn over the account. It's not that the master can't believe in the behaviors of Treasurer Shi and Brother Jia. He seems to be very happy just looking at the surplus on the account books. The old master nodded and said, this is a good habit. You can earn a small amount of money and hold on to a large amount of money. Every year you can make more money. The more you save, the more solid your family is, and the better each year. Qin Lingjun sighed, looked up at the old master and said sincerely, the most sacred master speaks truthfully, even I can understand. The old master seemed to have some thoughts and smiled. The Zen Buddhism started from the 5 ancestors and the 6 ancestors, and the Dharma has not chosen its roots. In fact, Buddhism has begun to speak very plainly. After that, he gradually became more lofty and obscure. There were countless Buddhist scriptures and the common people could not understand it again. During the period, Buddhism had a breaking talk that went further than the unwritten words, and many monks directly said that they were not happy. When talking about Buddhism and Dharma, if you don't talk about learning and just talk about the propagation of pulses, it is a bit similar to our Confucian desire to destroy people. Qin Lingjun was confused and didn't dare to say a word. Fortunately, the old master didn't seem to want to talk about it. The two climbed up the stairs in Qilong Alley together, and the old master asked, does this alley have a name? Qin Lingjun nodded vigorously. Yes, it's called Qilong Alley. A little higher, the top of the alley, we locals are used to calling it the tip of the fire. The old master nodded. Sure enough, there are mysteries hidden everywhere. Before leaving his hometown, Lu Qin used to travel freely in the aura of heaven and earth. He also cultivated the clouds and planted yao grass, and the wind and rain followed the monarch in the cloud. The old master walked to the top of the steps, turned his head and looked at the first steps and asked, Jingqing, where is your place of enlightenment? Qin Lingjun looked shocked, puzzled and said, is there anything you don't know about the knowledge of the holy master? The old master smiled. It's not that I can't know or I don't want to know. It's just that a few of us need to be restrained, otherwise the people, things and everything in the world will be quickly transformed by us. That's why Daozu often stayed in the little lotus cave. Even the Baiyijing was reluctant to move. I was worried that once Theon passed halfway, everything would begin to become one involuntarily and irreversibly, first of all the ordinary people under the mountain. And then the monks on the mountain and finally the turn of the upper 5 realms, and maybe at the end, there will only be a group of 14 realm great monks left in the entire Qingming world. There are thousands of miles of mountains and rivers in the world, all of which are Taoist temples, no matter how vulgar people stand. This was the riverside discussion that year. It was a 10,000-year covenant that had long been agreed. Daozu was responsible for finding a way to crack it. From the beginning he was most worried about this. Of course the Taoism of Taoist ancestors is very high. Those who can work harder are justified. Qin Lingjun heard it bitterly and panicked, murmured, Master most holy, tell me what you do. The old master smiled and said, I just heard what people said, so you don't need to say it yourself. Besides, it's hard for you to say it now. Jingqing, why don't we make a bet and see if we can say the word Taozu? As for the three of us, if you can tell others, even if you win. By the way, it'll give you a reminder, the only way to crack it is not to write words, only to understand it. Qin Lingjun thought in her heart, just about to say something. For example, when he thought of how to brag with Brother Jia, he started to feel dizzy. After several attempts, Qin Lingjun shook his head and didn't think about it. Wu Yishe said, my place of cultivation is Huang Ting Guiyu Jiang. The old master said, Huang Ting Jing, that is a Daoist sutra. I heard that by reciting this sutra, people who can refine the mind and gain the Tao over time, all the gods are with them. There are many techniques, and when you look at it carefully, they are actually all similar paths, such as the way of thinking for a cultivator is to plant rice in the heart, to train the spirit of the morale, to cultivate, and every time you break, it is a spring planting and autumn harvest in a year. The 10 realms of pure martial arts on the first level, the beauty of aura is just about the same number of ways. It swallows the mountains and rivers, turns it into one's own use, sees it as believable, then returns to the void, gathers together and becomes one's own territory. So Taoism respects the emptiness of oneself, Confucianism says that a gentleman is not a weapon, and Buddhism says that it is empty, and that all aspects are incompatible. Listening to these brain-painful words, the forehead of the boy in Xing-yi became a lock of hair because of sweat. It was very funny, and the more I thought about it, the more I became afraid. Qin Lingjun spread out his hands, sweaty and wrinkled pitifully. Holy Master, I'm very nervous at the moment. You can't remember what the old man said. Can you wait for my master to come home and tell him go? My master has a good memory, likes to learn things and learns everything fast. Tell him he must know everything and he can draw inferences from other things. The old master was non-committal, smiled and changed the subject. Your master's gentleman, that is the old scholar of Wenxing, has he ever said something about the word royal? Qin Lingjun looked dull and blank. Master Wenxing is my master's husband and not my master Jinking's husband. The most sacred teacher, you are a bit unprepared in the school examinations like this. You really don't conform to the rules of the world. Forget it, the most sacred master is not a mess. Alas, if Mr. is here, no matter what the most holy master says, he can take it. Is it possible that I will read more books in the future? There are a lot of books on the mountain, the old cook, hee. Hey, the most sacred master was standing beside him, looking for death. Qin Lingjun slapped himself directly, his mother's shot became heavy and his face was stern. The old master smiled and said, you don't need to be so restrained. A person's many desires are due to his nature, which of course will make people make many mistakes, but every time we know, admit and correct mistakes, we are adding bricks to the foot of this world, and adding tiles to the heights of the house of inferior travel. In fact, that's a good thing. As Tao Zu said, even he is a passerby on earth, which is a big truth, but everyone can walk more smoothly for future generations and do things within their power which can benefit others and themselves. Why not do it? Of course, if there are people who only pursue the pure freedom in their hearts, it is also a kind of freedom that is understandable. The old master smiled and gave the answer. It's the general that says that the Emperor Yuju, the princes Yutu and the doctor serve the what? Earlier Yushirya. Earlier there is also an old yellow calendar. The saints migrate to the 4 evils, scattered around the world to guard against the charm. The most sacred master patted the head of the boy in Xing-yi and said with a smile, the green snake is in the box. When we arrived at Ni Ping Alley, Qin Lingjun was still leading the way. He first introduced the restored Chao's ancestral house, and then walked towards the 2 houses adjacent to Qin Pingon and Song Jisan. The old master walked slowly, making a slight detour. I stopped and glanced at the place where the kiln workers buried the rouge boxes in the past. Water burns fire. Qingtong Tianjun is indeed embarrassing. This rain master in the ancient heavenly court was the second highest deity of the water ministry, second only to the water Lilu. All traces of the Sandao were erased by the old man from the drug store. Moreover, the Sandao is very measured. It is not the kind of brain thrown to Qin Pingan, but more like a young man in Ni Ping Alley. A seed gradually blooms. The ancient gods of the old heaven have no distinction between men and women in the eyes of later generations. If a relatively precise definition must be given, it is the difference between yin and yang proposed by Taoist ancestors. In the heavy rain, a thin teenager blocked a gorgeously dressed peer in this alley and pinched the other's neck. The straw shoe boy once caught a little loach and gave it to the little slug who was kept in a tank. Of course there is also the buried rouge box of the kiln worker here. Song Jisun squatted on the wall to watch the excitement, and Qin Pingon rescued Lu Xianyang. On the way to the Desui Academy together after getting along day and night, Li Huai alone was the closest to Qin Pingan and most recognized in his heart. Countless similar little things hide extremely obscure and far-reaching thoughts and divine transformations. Not only was Qin Pingon silently obtained, but also Qin Ping's own divinity was lost. This is the power of Old Man Yang's handwriting. Every time he affirms others, Qin Pingon will lose a part of his divinity, but every time a certain affirmation after self-denial, he can quietly eat part of the accumulated divinity in his body. Moreover, Li Baoping's innocent heart, all the unconstrained thoughts, are also a kind of unification to some extent. Ma Kexuan's wanton and reckless behavior is not pure. Li Huai's Hongfu Qitian Lin Shiyi's Shiyi method that is almost innately familiar. Lu Xianyang's talent is extraordinary. He can learn everything very quickly, and has a handy situation far beyond ordinary people. Song Jisun uses dragon energy as his practice. At the beginning, Zhigui is expected to be reborn, and after regaining his true dragon posture he will continue to make further progress. Taoyexiang Xialing's acceptance, swallowing, digestion Taoism is the road to heaven. The of fire Wanxiu and the of water Li Liu's supreme divinity overlooks the world, and constantly gathers fragments of humanity. All the younger generations in the town are blindfolded. In this silent struggle between the heavens and the realms, everyone originally hoped to be that one. The old master raised his arm and shook his head with a virtual hand. There is a 3 feet above the head. The ancient gods created the human race. The water is the basis, and the water is from the long river of time. After that, the soil is formed and human beings have the roughest form and spirit. Dao Zhu and Qin Lingjun chatted and casually mentioned the interdependence of mountains and rivers. After all, it's actually talking about the principle of human beings. However, mountains and rivers are so, people are even more so. So Cui Dongshan once said that the ancestor of the 3 educations, only on the issue of the water on the road, was friendly and never quarreled. Fire refining is a technique, and what the refining is a part of the pure divinity gifted by the gods to the human race. This is the way of fire alchemy. Therefore, above the earth, human beings who have both innate divinity but lack a complete divinity at the same time will have 7 emotions and 6 desires, and all kinds of complex dispositions. The so-called golden branches and jade leaves, by the monks, is to use the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as branches and leaves, and this is wood. This is the earliest 5 elements of heaven and earth. And where does the heaven and earth aura, which is suitable for spiritual people to practice the path, come from? It is the aftermath of the heavenly path that has not been completely integrated into the long river of time after the corpses of many gods have disappeared. This determines why the human race is the blessed head of all spirits in the world, and why the demon race must abandon the advantages of innate physique toughness and must develop a personal shape if it wants to cultivate and climb high. There was an agreement between Sanjiao Patriarch and Old Man Yang. As long as the latter abides by the oath, Sanjiao Patriarch's eyes will not look at this place. It's just a family of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and soldiers. The saints of past generations will be responsible for staring at the flying ascension platform and Jinjian Tower here. In fact, Old Man Yang never breached the contract in the end. The old master smiled. That's right, only 1,000 days is a thief. There is no reason for 1,000 days to guard against thieves. However, the most fundamental reason was Qing Tong Tianjin's final choice. It was too clever and there were too many blindfolds. The most important thing is that Old Man Yang did not choose Qin Pingon from the beginning, but kept betting and adding chips bit by bit. This kind of behavior is too inconspicuous in the life of the Old Man Yang Wanyan painted in prison. Of the younger generation, Song Jisun, Zhao Yu, and Guqin, who did not receive 1 or even a few rounds of gifts back then. On Qin Pingon, the Old Man Yang's bet was rather stingy, as if only a little bit of oil was added to key points that were not easily detectable a few times, and a light was always on the wind and rain. For example, a 5-year-old child must go up the mountain to collect medicine to exchange money from the pharmacy, and then buy the medicine home before he can cook the medicine. I can't beat the equivalent of exchange. This truth how many adults, how many mountain cultivators, may live a lifetime without understanding. Another example is the crossing the river in Qin Pingon when he was young. Someone needed to pull it so that the child would not jump into the flood, and the old man Yang appeared. The old master glanced at the end of the alley and squinted. Well, as expected, the child wandered in the alley back then. From dusk to night, the child finally waited until someone opened the door. It was the woman's own kindness. It's also the intentional traction of old man Yang. But it's not Tianjun Qing Tong. The old master stepped out and stood sideways against the wall. After one hand was negative, the other hand and the fingers were brought together, gently twisting the dotted line. Is it the old man Yao who reincarnated from Medicine Buddha? Human nature is a cage given to mankind by gods. Freedom is a punishment. Buddhism talks about self-nature and emphasizes that the heart is the Buddha. It is to hope that people can use great perseverance, great enlightenment and great compassion to change the trajectory slightly and create a brand new one on the top of the mountain that originally led to the complete and pure divinity. The way. The old master turned his head, like a hungry child standing in the alley. He was thin and thin with a yellowish face. He first heard the door opening. The child seemed to be unable to believe it. He trod a few steps, then stopped and saw the dim patch. Bright, suddenly gushing from the door into the alley, blinked and finally stared at the woman who opened the door in a daze. The hope and despair is often like this. When it first comes, it is not joy but can't believe it. In the child's eyes at that time, the radiance gradually glowing as bright as a pair of eyes with the sun and the moon. A lonely alley kid at that moment, blooming in extremely bright humanity. It is hope. And this kind of humanity and hope will support the child to grow up. The old master turned his head and looked around, and across a wall he looked at the future Shujian Lake and saw the haggard and withered accountant. The old master retracted his gaze and sighed. Cui Yang, who was slanted with his sword, was really not afraid that Qin Pingan would kill Gukan with a punch, or would he just leave? Once Qin Pingan's humanity is cut off here, the sequelae will be too great to imagine. After Qin Pingan's various travels and training, especially the training of the human mind as a hermit, will make Qin Pingan's ability to cover up mistakes, will infinitely approach Cui Yang's self-deception and become unconscious. Fuck you, embroidered tiger. One is not careful. Maybe Qin Pingan is the one who repairs the old as the old, not the new now. The old master whispered and cursed. Qin Lingjun always stood at the door of his master and felt more at ease here. The old master turned his head and smiled and said, Jingqing, wait a while here, I will go to a place and come back soon. Qin Lingjun straightened up immediately and replied loudly, it's a good order. I won't move here anymore. A water temple in Qinghuan State, the Hebo Temple, which covers an area of more than 10 acres, was fortunately not affected by the war and was preserved. Now the incense is more and more prosperous. In the veranda of the fourth entrance, the old master stood under the wall with inscriptions on the wall, including Pei Qian's Heaven and Earth Aki, and Pei Qian and Master are here, as well as Zhou Lian's cursive script. Dry pen and light ink, more than 100 characters all in one go. However, the old master paid more attention and he focused on the 2 sentences. The old master looked up to read the words and smiled. The moon is in the sky, the moon is in the world, and the moon is on the shoulders of studying for school. The wind in the mountains, the wind by the water, the wind at the foot of the sword, the wind in the sage's study, the wind blowing duckweed meat. It's a good wind and moon, and the broken circle meets again. Lu Chen was on the Great Wall of Jianqi saying that the moon in the sky is gathering snow, and the snow in the world is breaking away from the moon. In the final analysis they are going back one by one. And Zhou Lian's cursive inscriptions are on the wall, more than 100 words. All belong to unintentional words. In fact, apart from the text, aside from the content, what it really expresses is the gathering and dispersing of, gathering like mountains, scattered like wind and rain meaning. The former Zhou Lian and the current Lu Shen can be regarded as a mysterious echo. How could Daozu stand such a direct disciple who only likes to watch theaters and is quiet and inactive? In the end, Lizhu Dongtian made such a big movement. Lu Chen, who had been here for many years, contributed to the situation. He had to count his share and couldn't escape. This time temporarily borrowing a 14-level Taoist technique to Qin Pingan, and traveling with a few sword practitioners in the barren hinterland, is considered to have made up for it. The reason why Taoist ancestors was willing to look at it again was that the choice made by Qin Pingan as a young hidden official was very important. Return to Mud Bottle Alley. The old master walked up to Qin Lingjun and looked at the yellow mud wall in the yard. It is conceivable that when the house owner was young, carrying a basket of wild vegetables and returning home from the river, he must often hold dog's tail grass, string small fish and dry it. Adult dried fish do not want to waste it all, crunchy and crispy. The whole dried fish the child will only eat. The stomach may still not have enough to eat but can survive. The people regard food as their heaven. Both Jiagubibo are the foundation of Xingmin and Shiji. Every family has plenty of food and clothing. Pedestrians on the road, warm clothes and shoes. After holding his hands, the old master stood outside the door and looked inside, silent for a long time. Qin Lingjun lay on the top of the yellow mud wall with his feet hanging in the air and muttered, "The most sacred master. Although my husband is a sword immortal, he is a master of martial arts, a mountain master of Luopa Mountain, and a hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. But I know that what my master wants most is to be a scholar with a clear conscience. It has not been easy to walk along the way. The truth is that the most undesirable meal in the world is not just to buy Jiafan. Because of myself. If you don't have a home, you have to eat 100 food. And my master is nostalgic and most grateful. How did the elders come from the sky? It's because my master talked with the elderly when he was a child. So these years are actually very hard. Every time I go back to my hometown, I will come here to sit. It is the master reminding myself that I can't forget my roots. Your old man is the grandfather of scholars, so don't allow others to bully him." The old master smiled and said, "Then if you forget your roots, your master will be able to live more easily?" Qin Lingjun said without hesitation, "A good man lives in peace and a good man lives in peace." The old master smiled and said, "This is indeed a very beautiful thing and it is worthy of our hope." Qin Lingjun grinned and lay on the wall, finally able to do something for his master. The old master seemed to be in a good mood right now, patted the boy and Xingyi on the shoulder, smiled, "Go." Qin Lingjun let go, and when he landed he wondered, "Sage master, where are we going next? Go to Wenwu Temple?" The old master smiled and said, "I have slapped Daozu on the shoulder and that one is not bad anymore. In the future, when talking about heroes at the wine table, where is your opponent?" Qin Lingjun was sweating and waved his hands vigorously without saying a word. "Most holy master, are you cheating me?" The old master reached out his hand and grabbed the Xingyi boy by the arm. "What are you afraid of, isn't it?" Qin Lingjun stood on his feet, leaned back and almost shed tears on the spot and howled, "I'm not going, I'm really not going. My master believes in Buddhism and I also followed the kind of sincere we fell in love. Shanfeng, the #1 purpose, is to treat people with sincerity. If the master finds out in the future, Qin Lingjun can't beat him." On the side of Luopa Mountain, there was a table at the entrance of the mountain. On the other side there was a little girl in black, carrying a golden pole on her shoulders, a green bamboo stick across her knees, and a small cotton satchel slung, sitting on a small bamboo chair. She saw an old Taoist standing over the table, rubbing her eyes, not her dizziness. The little girl leaned the hiking stick and golden pole against the bamboo chair, immediately stood up and ran to the tall old Taoist. He stood still, raised his head and asked, "Old Taoist, are you thirsty? We have tea here for customers." The little girl added, "No money." Seeing that the old Taoist said nothing, Xiaomili said again, "Ha, the tea is not well known. The tea comes from our own old tea tree on the mountain. The old chef personally fried it. It is this year's new tea." Laoguan nodded and sat on the bench. Compared to the small town, he was relieved. Otherwise, Qin Pingon had to settle this account, and it would lose his identity to shoot the little reptile. Those with thin ground will not produce big things, and those with shallow water will not swim. Before the millet is used to boil the water, first open the cotton bag and take out a large handful of melon seeds on the table. In fact, there are melon seeds in the 2 sleeves. The little girl is showing off to outsiders. Xiaomili asked, "Old Taoist, is it enough? If it is not enough, I still have it." The old Guanju thought of the Jingqing Daoist friend again. The words were almost the same, but they were so different. The old Guanju rarely had a smiling face and said, "Enough." The little girl in black asked the old man to wait for a while, and she went busy on her own. Soon, carrying a tin can of tea and a pot of boiling water, he poured a bowl of tea for the old man and the millet grains left. Old Guanju smiled and asked, "Won't the little girl sit for a while?" The little girl shook her head vigorously. "No, Sister Nwanshu forbids, saying that it will prevent the guests from uncomfortable drinking tea." Xiaomili finally reminded, By the way, the tea that has just been boiled, the old man is careful to burn it. Old Guanju smiled, and his sincere words remembered the mud-legged man carrying the long breath into the lotus root. There are so many things in the world as hairs. I have small things as big as a fight. Lao Guanju raised the tea bowl and asked with a smile, "You are the right guardian of Luopa Mountain, right?" Zhou Mili was about to turn around and immediately nodded vigorously. The little girl pursed her lips and smiled with a small face, big eyes and two faint yellow eyebrows. There is joy everywhere. The old Taoist was so open and bright she had already taken a seat without being polite. Millet sits on the bench, nibbling on melon seeds, not to disturb the old master drinking tea. For no reason, I discovered that the old cook had come to the gate of the mountain at some point. Millet clapped his hands and asked curiously, "Old cook, how come down the mountain today?" "I finished reading the book." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "It's not yet, you have to watch it slowly." Xiao Mili turned his head to look at the old Taoist chief, stretched out his hand to block his mouth. "Old Taoist, the old cook is our chief steward of Leopashen. Cooking is a must-have. If the two of you meet each other, you will be lucky." Lao Guanju nodded. "No matter how bad guests come to the door and give the little girl such a treat, you have to make money with kindness. Old people from the rivers and lakes will fall in love." Zhu Lian smiled and said, "Xiaomi Li, can you let me have a few words with this old Taoist leader alone?" Millet nodded obediently, opened the cotton satchel again, poured some melon seeds for the old cook and the old chieftain on the table, sat on the bench, turned his hips, stood firmly on the ground, then turned around, held his fists and left. Zhu Lian and Lao Guanju held their fists together and sat down, sitting opposite each other, and poured themselves a bowl of tea. Lao Guanju smiled and said, "What does Kangyi do? I have a good skin that can make heaven and earth seductive." Julian laughed off. "Seeing each other on the top of the mountain, you still see the people who were watching?" The old master asked, "When will you wake up from dream?" The most promising great monk among the 15th realms after the patriarch of the three teachings is the one in front of him. Julian answered the question, "Life is like a book. All the people and things we encounter are foreshadowing in the book." Lao Guanju nodded and said, "So there are no coincidences and no books. Some coincidences are indescribable, such as far away in the sky, Qin Shi. Qin is one. The other is Qin." Sword of Coming Chapter 851. How dare Qin Lingjun pat that person on the shoulder? He was still alive and dead, but the old master had no choice but to give up and let Qin Lingjun take himself out of the town, neither to the gods' graves nor to the Wenwu temple, but just a detour. The Longshu River, go to the stone arch bridge and finally take a look at the ruins of the small temple similar to the pavilion. Qin Lingjun tentatively asked. "The most sacred master, who was the tall Taoist old before, has his realm very high?" The old master nodded. "It is very high. If the realm is not high, the Taoist ancestor will not teach him the Taoism. Moreover, this Taoist friend in his early years was a great beneficiary to our human race, so the ritual sage was set in line with the earthly branch. In the 12 zodiac signs the ranking is very high. It is the bull temper of fellow Daoist. Forget it, it's not kind to say right and wrong behind." Qin Lingjun was anxious, but listening, "It seems to be a bit of a holiday with my master? What to do? I must not be able to beat the old Taoist, and the Holy Master said that he would be guilty in fighting with Taoist ancestors, so no matter how you look at it, I don't take advantage of it." "Nonsense, of course he and the most sacred master are in the same camp and you can't turn your elbows outside. What is called Hunjiangu means that two groups of people are fighting and fighting in groups. Even if the number of people is huge and there are few people on their own side, they are destined to be unable to fight." Earlier the old Taoist mentioned the lotus root flower blessed land. Listen to the tone, his master has suffered and lost face there. Regarding the blessed land that was renamed the lotus root blessed land, Qin Lingjun only knew that Pei Qian and Chao Qingyang, as well as the old cooks and cultivators, all came from this wonderful geomantic land, but they didn't like to talk more about their hometown. Qin Lingjun was too lazy to ask about the matter, so he always mistakenly thought that it was an inferior lotus flower blessed land in the past, and there were not even a few cultivators and there was no land immortal. What storms could be caused? How could I think of running out of a guy called Daoist friend by the ancestors? It's really not good to look at him. It's because I was kind to others and talked about a lot of grass in the mountains in my own family. Otherwise, this foolish account, my little arm the calf cannot be carried down." The old master shook his head. In fact, in the lotus roots, this Taoist friend recognized your master's life in the world, especially the long way in the heart, and it was just right to relieve people. Qin Lingjun was relieved, straightened his chest and laughed. My elder, the elders have always had a good relationship with them. As for me, I have to learn how to do it, but it's okay. The old master smiled and said, I'm not good at this kind of elders. I took my disciples to study the world and met a fisherman, but he couldn't cross the river by boat. Looking back, I was still very energetic at that time. I'm pleased by Dideo. Qin Lingjun said courageously, my master took Aquarius and they went to the Sui dynasty for a study tour, relying on the mountains and rivers all the way to eat. It was my master and the woodcutter knocking on the door to stay. It was relatively smooth. The old master asked, Jingqing, you have followed Qin Pingon for many years and there are a lot of books on the mountain, so you never read Master Lu's fisherman's article. I don't know the source of the story of court resistance. I once scolded me, the master still has a proud face. Qin Lingjun looked embarrassed and said, I have finished reading all the books for my master. I only know how to practice diligently every day in Luapa Mountain, so I temporarily ignore it. The old master smiled and said, I still have to read more so that I can catch up when I chat with people. Qin Lingjun pecked at the rice, nodded vigorously and said, I am sure I can read and practice properly in the future. Every time I go down the mountain for a stroll, I often go to the Confucian temple in Huaihuang County to offer incense to the most holy master and kowtow. Qin Lingjun hesitated and asked curiously, can you ask the Buddha's Dharma like? The implication is to ask if your old man can beat the Buddha. The old master said with a smile, it can turn 1,000 worlds into a small dust and can turn a flower into a world of mountains and rivers. What do you think of Buddhism? Qin Lingjun sighed. He didn't stop his hands and patted the sleeve of the old master subconsciously. It was okay. Anyway, fighting this kind of thing would hurt the peace. It's better to fight less. The old master didn't care about this and asked casually, I have been here for a long time, is there anyone I don't like? Qin Lingjun withdrew his hands in angrily, and simply learned from his master's hands and sleeves, so as not to make similar rude behaviors. After thinking about it, there is nothing really annoying. It's just that the holy master asked, he always has to give an answer. Just pick. There was a relatively unpleasant guy, Ma Kushuan in Xinghua Lane, who doesn't care about things, is 1,000 miles worse than my master. The old master naturally knows the truth about Zhenwu Mountain, but he didn't say whether this young man is good or bad. He just revealed the secret with Qin Lingjun with a smile, and gave an inside story of the old past. The wild world is driving the puppet to move. The old blind man in Shirwan Dashan, who was very disappointed with a few of us, took out a pair of eyeballs and threw them in Howren and Qingming respectively, saying that he would see us all become like gods before. That kind of existence. One of these 2 eyeballs was taken to the land of lotus roots by the master of the old view, and given to the Taoist boy who burned the fire. The rest stayed by Ma Kushuan. Old man Yang was in Ma Kushuan in his early years. It's not a small bet on the body. The old master said with emotion. At that time the old blind man only talked about his appearance. It was indeed the best. Qin Qing was far worse than him, but both were solid eyes, a tendon and a bad temper. Qin Lingjun remembered something in a hurry. In fact, there are people who hate, but there is nothing to say, a very unreasonable woman, and I am a big man and I can't take her. That's wrong. Pei Qian killed the white goose's woman and insisted on Pei Qian to lose money to her. Pei Qian finally paid for it. At that time Pei Qian was actually very sad, but at that time the master was traveling abroad and was not at home, so he could only hold back. In fact, Pei Qian just went to the school to study and he made trouble on the way after class in school. He really likes to chase the white goose, but every time he keeps the rice bran and corn in the pocket of the millet grains, Pei Qian will give a big hand after the trouble is over. With a wave, immediately throw a handful of millet grains in the alleys, which is regarded as a reward to the so-called defeated opponents. The old master nodded. I want to be sad. In the earliest glorious era when 100 schools of thought were contending, the Mahis school was once a prominent scholar in the vast world. And there was also the Yangzhou school, who became unknown in later generations. The words of the 2 families once filled the world, so that there was no return to Yangzhigui Mo. The statement. Then there was an important turning point that later generations did not pay much attention to, that is, the sub-saints invited the saints to return to the Zhongtu Confucian temple from outside the sky to discuss the matter. In the end, the performance of the Confucian temple was to suppress the Yangzhou school and not let the whole world follow the direction of this school. Going forward and afterward is the rise of Yaxing, who accompanies the Confucian temple, and afterward, it is the literary sage who proposes that human nature is evil. In fact, many of the patriarchs of the philosophers of the 100 schools have criticized this very seriously. They think that the saints of rituals are worried about their own avenues. The rules of etiquette are incompatible with the individual freedom advocated by the Yangzhou school. Conflict, they feel that there is indeed an invisible dispute between the order of the world and the freedom of the individual. Therefore, many people believe that the saint of rites is selfish, and they agree to the proposal of the saint. The ritual saint, who has never liked to drink, rarely took the initiative to find the most holy master to drink. But when drinking, the ritual did not say anything, just drank wine. Of course, the old master knows the reason. It is not that the Yangzhou school, which advocates everyone for oneself, is righteous, is not good. If it is not good, it will not become a prominent school in the world. It is very open and thorough in terms of life and death, and it is unique and extremely novelty. Don't be tired of things, don't hurt foreign things, is also excellent. It is not that this school of learning is close to Taoism, but this kind of learning will one day be like a river flooding the world and spreading. Becoming a worldly way will make all the world's people walking on this road, everyone become more and more extreme, and here is the more hidden human heart and divine dispute. The old master asked, Jingqing, what does your master think of the Yangzhou school? Qin Lingjun thought for a while and answered honestly, my master never mentioned it, but I heard from De Baigo that it is a kind of chaotic exquisiteness, which is not good. A group of people study this way, it is harmless and elegant, and it can be beneficial. In the world, if everyone is like this, it will be a flash in the pan. If it weren't for Cui Dongshan's nonsense, Qin Lingjun had never heard of Yangzhou school. Qin Lingjun has always thought that Big White Goose is a drunk, the kind of person who can talk about alcohol without drinking. The two of them walked along the Longshu River. On this road, the holy master knew everything about themselves. Qin Lingjun walked a little bit. Master, your old man talked to me so much today, you must think I'm a manufacturable, right? The old master smiled and said, what is the truth? Qin Lingjun looked sincere and said, your old man is so busy you are willing to talk to me all the way. The old master answered the wrong question. Every yesterday's self is our biggest backer today. Jingqing, why do you like to drink? Huh. Need a reason to like drinking? Right. The most holy master, can I ask your old man a question? Of course can. Who is most afraid of at the wine table? It's the kind of guy who gets his face on drinking. Oh, I really can't help the most holy master. This sentence came to my heart. Qin Lingjun continued to ask tentatively, which sentence is the most annoying? I'm talking about persuading alcohol to hurt your character. I did what you want. Oh, the knowledge of the most sacred master is indeed remarkable. Qin Lingjun admired it from the bottom of his heart and grinned. I didn't expect your old man to be someone who came here. Jingqing, then I ask you, what do you think is poor, just rich and ignorant? The old master looked at the boy in Tsing-yi who started to dangle his sleeves beside him. Qin Lingjun immediately regained his arms and sleeves and changed his words. For the rich and unkind, the poor and the wicked? The old master smiled. Just say something from your heart. Qin Lingjun breathed a sigh of relief thinking about the individual to death. That is, there is no money in his pocket, so poor that he can't marry a wife, bachelor, find someone to buy wine on credit, no one is willing to borrow money, so poor that it's a face, and this to save face you have to hide as if you can't see the light and then slap it, the last remaining face which was smashed by a casual foot one day, can only wait until the people are gone and others have finished watching it. So busy that I dare to find a chance to pick it up from the ground. That's it. You only dare to doubt the world, not yourself? The old master nodded and had two answers, especially the latter, which was really unexpected. He smiled and asked, did you figure it out on the wine table? Qin Lingjun was a little embarrassed, raised his sleeves and rubbed his face. How can it be? The wine table is really drunk. I don't know the height of the sky. I am too lazy to follow the master to the mountain, and I like to make excuses for myself and change. I just like to go down the mountain and come to the town to relax. Don't blame me. I said that I'm diligent. I'm just eating on the mountain and drinking down the mountain. Fortunately, the master sees it. In my eyes, he never cares about me. Master doesn't care. Others are embarrassed to take care of me. The most holy master, am really not bragging. We Laotian, no matter who it is, respect the master from the bottom of our hearts. The old master looked up at Luapa Mountain. Except for an uncommon name, there is nothing strange about things. But this is the biggest weirdness. The old master asked, why did Qin Pingon choose Luopishan when he bought the mountain? Qin Lingjun chuckled and said, there is a saying here. I heard Pei Qian secretly say that the old master had 2 hills at the earliest, one Jinju Mountain. It costs less, just a gold fine copper coin, and another one. It's the Luapa Mountain where our patriarch hall is now. At that time the master spread out a picture of the situation of the mountain. I don't know the choice. As a result, a bird just passed by and pulled a pile of on the picture. It just fell on. Luapa Mountain haha laughed to death. The old master asked with a smile, does the old town talk about it? Qin Lingjun rubbed his face vigorously before finally holding back a smile. Master Pei Qian, the great disciple of the mountain, is really willing to say anything. The master said that the old man Yao, the master kiln worker, took him into the mountain to find soil. There is a miracle between the mountains and rivers. There is a 3 feet above the head. Anyway, my master believes this the most. But the master also said that he later speculated that it might be the intention of the national teacher. The old master nodded. Qin Pingan's guess was the truth, and it was indeed the work of Cui Yang. Of course, it's not a good idea to say, Lo Peo. But if you can get a certain word, the meaning will be completely different. The reason why Cui Yang stripped out a heart-pounding Cui Dongshan, in addition to those big plans that have already come to light, actually hides a more interesting means, that is, to use another self, perhaps to use 1 or 2 key words. Opening a certain kind of restriction is like a letter from home, sent to yourself in the years to come, to help remind yourself at what stage, time point, and what to say and do. Just like Daozu walked out of the Lotus Cave sky this time, left the Qingming world, he talked to himself early. Daozu has different questions and answers with some destined generations who have seen the future but have not yet come to him. The avenue evolves within the cave, carefully deduced, and it is already good. Howren embroidered the tiger. This time I asked the ancestor of the 3 teachers to take a seat. 1 asked and the 3 left. Of course, it does not mean that Cui Yang's mind, Taoism and knowledge are higher than those of the Sanjiao patriarch. It's like the patriarch of the 3 sects has thousands of choices. Cui Yang said that the path he helped choose is the one that he can prove to be the most beneficial to the world. This is the undoubted case. Then 3 of you to go or not to go. When he reached the stone arch bridge with no hanging swords, the old master stopped and looked down at the river and then raised his head slightly. On the far side of the blue cliff beside the river, where the strawshoe boy and the ponytail girl first met, one entered the water fish. A watchman catches fish. How many small fish swim freely in the blue water? A fight for the change of fish and dragon. The world will see the eternal dragon gate again, and the purple, gold and white scales are leaping. Qin Lingjun sat on the side of the bridge with his feet hanging in the air, arms around his chest, and raised his head and asked, the most holy master, your old man used to be on the side of Mud Bottle Alley. What did you look into the house? After holding his hands in his hands, the old master smiled and said, in order to survive, a poor hungry child dried the fish and ate all of it without any leftovers and ate it cleanly and quietly. A helpless child in Ni Ping Alley first learned how to cook medicine from a fellow at the drugstore, and then learned how to go up and down the water from Lu Xianyang, and then learned the craftsmanship of porcelain from the old man Yao in Long Yao, and practiced fist recognition from the fist book. After he left his hometown, he still looked at the world carefully, constantly learning how to behave in the world, learning as many skills as possible, every kind of recognition from the heart, every time careful self-certification and cultivating the heart are both a kind of silent growth, while at the same time, do everything possible to continuously give back to the world. The young Qin Pingon once told people that he would learn everything that is good. In the end, even Wu Shuangjiang and Jing Zhuzhong's art of dismantling everything in human hearts, and the young hermits of the age of confidence, are still learning. Presumably Qin Pingon will still be like this in the future. The old master looked at the river and asked, the term world is the earliest Buddhist language. Realm if it is based on our master's thus explanation of words? Qin Lingjun cried and said, Holy Master, don't look at me anymore, I definitely don't know. The old master pointed his finger at the ridge by the river and said with a smile, the field is also a place where weeds are planted and a paradigm of vertical and horizontal rows of rice paddies. The old scholar once said that people are born with desires and desires are not allowed. But there is no measure of demarcation you have to argue. Listen, is it a very clear context? So the final conclusion is that human nature is evil, which is caused by etiquette. The knowledge of old scholars is still very real. And you are the saint of rites, are you happy? Qin Lingjun was ashamed. The most holy master, I have read less, so I'm sorry to ask why I don't understand. It's okay. Books don't have long legs. There will be opportunities to read in the future. Don't read the books for nothing. The old master patted the boy in Xingyi on the head. After comforting him, he also exhorted him, if the road is not far away, don't eat for nothing. Qin Lingjun is ignorant, don't care, remember to talk after listening. The old master said with Yenyu, Jingqing, you can go on your own, don't help lead the way. Qin Lingjun courageously asked, should I go to Qilong Alley for a drink? My master is not at home, I can help him drink a few more bowls. The old master shook his head and said with a smile, drinking now is nothing like talking. Don't behave when you get a bargain. This is a good habit. Don't worry, it's not about you but about our Confucianism. Qin Lingjun stepped back a few steps and said goodbye to the most sacred master. Then he turned and ran down the stone arch bridge. He didn't dare to return directly to Luopa Mountain. He planned to go to Qilong Lane to find Brother Jiao for a drink. The boy in Xingyi had already ran away, suddenly stopped, turned and shouted loudly, Sacred Master, I think you are still the most powerful. I don't understand how powerful it is. Anyway, it's this. Qin Lingjun raised his arms high and gave a thumbs up. The old master smiled and nodded, which was also very comforting. The heaven and the earth, the rebellious journey of all things, the time and the passerby of 100 generations, I am also a pedestrian on the road. Sad and bitter? Oddly fortunate. I went to Jun's house unknowingly while crossing the water to see the flowers. The old master expressed his gratitude to the whole world and also said goodbye. The monk walks in the wind, gallops to the sun and the moon and is kind. People in the world, because they are not free, are pursuing freedom, hoping that next time the vicissitudes of life will turn into a blessing. Everyone will have plenty of food and clothing and they will be full of books. Finally, the most sage master glanced at the back alley of the town. The small alley is called Mud Bottle Alley. The sky is healthy, and the gentleman strives for self-improvement. A flower grows out of the silt and makes a bottle with your own heart. Isn't it beautiful when the flower opens? I believe that the other two who traveled in the small town also viewed that one in this way. Lao Guanzhu glanced at the side of the mountain road, like a white cloud falling from the green hills. In addition, there is a female martial artist walking down the mountain. The young man in white is walking around in circles around the woman, screaming, bouncing and playing clumsy punches. The woman is accustomed to it. She turned a blind eye to his troubles, went down the mountain and walked and fisted. The old master was too lazy to look at that Cui Dongshan again. He stretched out his hand and grabbed it. There were two more things in his hand, a token rune sword cast by Longquan Sword Sect, and a safe and sound card issued by the Ministry of Penalty. Rustic. As for where the two things came from, God knows. The master of Old View held the Fujian with his and squinted his eyes for a closer look. As expected, there is an ancient sword technique that is not easily detectable. A trainer with insufficient realm is destined to fail to see through it. As for what is meant by inadequate realm, of course it is not enough under the 14th realm of Qi training and Ascension realm sword repair. It's just that the sword art is incomplete. I want to make it up. About MO5 or 6 rune swords are needed. However, no matter what the price of the rune sword is, as long as someone is willing to do this, it is a very profitable business. How can you make a profit? This sword tactic alone is enough to make a kendo sect stand a firm foothold in the vast world. The key is that the threshold of this tactic is low. As long as you are a sword cultivator, you can practice sword practice step by step without having a good qualification. Strength. The rank of sword arts is not high, but it is safe to practice. Therefore, the larger the sect, the more important this kind of Taoism is. On the other side of the steps, Cui Dongshan leaped high, turned sideways, settled by the table, shook his two big white sleeves, looked up and said to himself, Autumn is coming, the autumn breeze is clear and the autumn moon is coming. Ming, the autumn clouds are full of emptiness and the autumn water falls into the sky. Then he closed his gaze, first glanced at the old cook, and then at the old master who is no stranger to him. Cui Dongshan said with a hippie smile, Autumn is coming and the rivers are flooded with vast rivers and rivers. It's hard to argue. Zhu Lian smiled and put it down, saying this was a bit awkward. Cui Dongshan sat on the bench with his back to the table, raised his foot and turned around and asked, "The mountains and rivers are lush, the clouds are deep and the roads are remote. Where does the veteran come from?" Zhou Xian licked the melon seeds and put himself in an old-fashioned view, probably about to start beating people. The old Guanju sneered, "There are cracks in everything in the world, and everything you see in your eyes, even the golden body of the gods, is invisible. Even the Taoist mind of a cultivator is not a complete one. This path, it won't work. If you Cui Yang spends his entire life, you still can't find it. It's destined to be useless. Otherwise, why should the patriarch of the three religions come here? Dao and Yi, if it is a certain object, wouldn't it be upset again?" Cui Dongshan complained, "What a bastard I am, Dongshan." The old view subject chuckled. Cui Dongshan shook his shoulders, muttering words like those of the master of the school. "Besides, the road is close? No eyelashes. The road is far away. What happens is true. The sage is near. Participate in business. The sage is far away. Enlightenment. God." The old master smiled and said, "Cui Yang, at any rate there was still a scholar who looked like a scholar. If you had such a virtue back then, you can guarantee that you will not get out of the lotus root." Cui Dongshan patted his chest as if he was terrified. The old Guanju drank a sip of tea. "If you will be a wife, you will conceal it on both sides and you will not be a daughter-in-law. In fact, it is often difficult to conceal from both sides." Wiping the table with his sleeve, Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and said, "Senior's words are not appropriate." Seeing that this guy continued to play stupid, he turned his head and looked at the woman who was walking along the steps and asked, "Is this the boxing disciple you picked?" Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Not a registered disciple. What's more, my three-legged cat kung fu, a woman has learned it, is not beautiful." Old Guanju disapproved and asked the woman, "Your name is Xianxia?" Xin, the mountain is small and high, describing the extreme appearance of the rocky cliffs. The Mandarin machine is a secular brocade machine, and poets have the metaphor of moving flowers and shadows. Luchan always does whatever he wants. He likes to put long lines to catch big fish, but it doesn't matter if he can't catch them. Whether it's Sure Ro in Riding Dragon Alley or Jean Li, a robe with 7 turns and twists, it's like a bait who only asks for a wish, and doesn't care about the broken fishing line or the swimming fish that eat bait. Xianxia had just stopped at the gate of the mountain. She knew how serious it was. An old Taoist priest who could make Mr. Zhu and Cui Dongshan take the initiative to go down the mountain to meet is not easy. For some reason the old Taoist looked as usual, but Xianxia felt extremely stressed, holding his fist and saying, in reply to the Daoist, "The junior's name is indeed Xianxia." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "What to scare a little girl into?" Cui Dongshan beckoned, "Millet, let's knock some melon seeds." The little girl in black immediately got up from the bamboo chair, trotted to the table and took out all the remaining melon seeds from the cotton bag, but not many. "Here, brother." Cui Dongshan slapped his head and asked, "Right guard just like that?" Hearing the name of the big white goose, Xiaomi Li kept his face straight and took out a large amount from his sleeve. Cui Dongshan nodded. "The right guard is generous." Lao Guanju asked Zhu Lian again, "How about the sword technique? Are you planning to choose from the sword fairy embryos of the Great Wall of Sword Qi?" The same old master, the Daoist master son of Dashuan Duguan, urged Lu Chen to go and turn to reincarnation as a sword repairman. This is not all a joke but a targeted one. Of course, just because of Sun Weishong's temper, Lu Chen really wants to be a sword repairman. It is estimated that no matter what, Lu Chen will be turned into a little Taoist boy with the lowest level of Xiandu, and he will call his ancestor a few times a day, otherwise he will hang on the peach tree. Hit. Zhu Lian smiled and said, "I don't have the face to teach others swordsmanship. It's not a misunderstanding. Haoran Jianxiu and throwing one to the blessed lotus root is a well-deserved sword fairy." In the history of Uwafudi, there are also some deeds of land immortals recorded in the history of barnyard officials, but there is no evidence to find out. Zhu Lian has also started to compile official history books in addition to calculating accounts and construction, and has seen many unfamiliar history of barnyard officials. What kind of immortal and ilk spit out sword pills, white light flashed and thousands of miles took the first level. However, even in the hometown, even these rumors of ghosts, mentioning the sword immortal line, there is nothing good to say. What is not the avenue of longevity but the side magic, the flying sword technique is difficult to achieve the avenue. But Zhou Lian's road to martial arts in the final analysis really came from books. This is exactly the same as Jiaxing, a scholar in the world. They are all self-taught without a teacher. They only rely on reading to learn and become talented, but one is practice. One is martial arts. When Zhou Lian first walked the rivers and lakes, he also traveled far with a sword, traveled all over the famous mountains and rivers and visited immortals. Another, with hidden thoughts, Zhou Lian wanted to know the boundary of the world. If it is really a round sky, no matter how vast the world is, there will be an end, right? The millet grain did not go far. His face was shocked and he turned his head and asked, "Does the old cook still play a sword?" Zhou Lian waved his hand. "What kind of swordsmanship? Don't listen to the polite words of such guests. It is far behind Pei Qian's crazy swordsmanship." Cui Dongshan lowered his head and licked melon seeds. "Xiaomi grains, don't you know this old cook took off his apron in the stove, went out and played with swords. He was very famous in the lotus roots. Very, it is said that on the long sword of the noble son Zhou Lian, what is entwined is the charming sentiment of the woman, which is incomparable to Yumi. I don't know how many women from the rivers and lakes have turned to practice swords infatuated for a lifetime, just to be able to compare with the old chef field. Cui Yang once followed the old talents and traveled to the lotus roots, and knew a lot about the local customs there. Millet hurriedly covered his stomach with one hand, pressed his mouth vigorously and said vaguely, "The old cook was once a noble son." Zhou Lian smiled and said, "The hero doesn't mention the bravery back then, it's all things of the past. The world affairs are all based on false accusations." Millet nodded heavily, turned around and ran back to the bamboo chair, grinning, just taking care of the old cook's face without a laugh. The left guardian in Qilong Alley just slipped to the gate of the mountain and looked up at the old Daoist from a distance. It immediately turned around and ran away. Old Guanzhu glanced, but unfortunately for some reason Wan Xiu changed his mind, otherwise he would have almost complied with the old saying, "Toad swallows the moon, Tengu eats the moon." Sui right side came from the hilltop Yujian from another place. She did not take a seat. She wanted to ask the of the lotus root to ask about her husband. Old Guanzhu said to her, "Tell Chen Pingon the survival of Tongyi's Hao Jindingwen doesn't matter, but Xiao Yuanran must be kept. As for that Ni Yuanran, you only need to talk to him and give out that one. Jindan, he's free now." The legal system of Jindingwen originates from the Loguan school of Taoism, which is a line of Taoism that, keep the grass as a building, watch the stars and look at the spirit. As for Ni Yuanzhan, who supported Artemisia in the blessed land of Yunku, it was exactly a chess piece thrown out of the blessed land by the old master. Sui right side hesitated and stopped, but in the end he still said nothing. Zhou Lian helped to clear the siege and took the initiative to nod and said, "What's so difficult about this? Just talk." Lao Guanzhu asked, "Why isn't Jiang Shangzhen of Yuguazong on the mountain?" Zhou Lian smiled and said, "I should have stayed on the mountain and went to Tongyi's Hao together, but our chief Zhou got more angry and ran away to the wild world." Sui caught Zhou Lian's wink on the right. She left silently and went to the millet grain side. Lao Guanzhu looked around and sighed, "I have never thought that in the end, your Confucianists will have the most advantage. Yido probably will be very angry." Once the patriarchs of the three religions were able to practice Taoism, academies, temples and Taoist temples at the same time, then the Haoran world, which is the most accommodating to different teaching questions, would of course receive the most gifts. At the same time as the Taoist ancestors, the patriarch of the three religions will take a trip to the ruins of the old heaven. Of course, this big problem will not be left to others. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "The second child is the best." The old master said softly, "Just say one thing, when there are no more 15 realms in the world and there are already 14 realms, how would you think about the chance to become a monk in the 14th realm?" Cui Dongshan nodded. "It's about to change, there are bad and good anyway, I am more inclined to the latter now." The old master asked, "Now? Why?" Cui Dongshan said solemnly, "My husband is here." The old Guanzhu turned to look at Zhou Lian, one of Lu Chen's 5 dreams and possibly even the second. Zhou Lian smiled and said, "Senior sees what I do and I am not as handsome as my son." The old View master laughed and said, "It's really a good place. It's a worthwhile trip and the style is very positive." Sort of Coming Chapter 852. The main reason that the old master came to this Luopa mountain was to see Zhou Lian. Unfortunately, he was a little disappointed. The person in front of him was far from awake. There are only 3.5 monks in the world, so that the old Taoists are most assured and respectful, the saint the head of Bai Yujing, the bodhisattva of the Western Buddhist country. The remaining half, disrespectful but relieved, is Lu Qin. However, the old watcher also has some doubts. Is this Zhou Xian already awake but has not really dreamed from the beginning? Lu Qin, this guy can't do anything. Once there are no such 15th realms between heaven and earth, then any current and future 14th realm great monk, no matter which world he is in, will actually lose one of the biggest shackles. Freedom is closer to the word pure. How unfortunately, there is another ritual saint who is most respectful in the world. But to say that the Qingming world, by Yujing's invincible temper, the second master of Yudo, has been known to passers-by for thousands of years. It is estimated that all the ascended realm great monks, whether they are genealogical monks or Yamazawa Yishio, I am afraid that they will have to carefully weigh the relationship with Bai Yujing. Even the existing 14th realm great monks in the Qingming world, as long as they are incompatible with Yuduki, they may need to arrange a retreat for themselves early. Of course, Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuangjiang and Dashuan Duguan Sun Daochang will be two exceptions. One is rushing to share life and death with Yudo, and the other is the fifth in the world that cannot be beaten by thunder. It is really not a fuel-efficient lamp to learn Dao Fa. What's more, Pan Dao helped you and Lu Qin talk a few good things about the Dry Valley. Yudo still have the face to look for trouble in the poor way to be a kind and revenge thing? Zhou Lian asked a question for no reason. If the Saint of Rights also leaves, what is the scene of the world? Old Guanzhou smiled and said, this question is too rebellious to ask. Cui Dongshan said bitterly, rusty, too irrational. Thanks to our good temperament, we will not care about your unreasonable troubles. He put his hands together, raised the top of his head and shook it vigorously. Zhou Lian asked again. After the Taoist ancestors went away, the great Songjiao disappeared for many years, and Lu Qin didn't care about everything. Will Yudo directly use a Bai Yujing to detain all the monks of the 14th realms with lightning speed? And most of the ascending realms? Is there such a possibility? So, is there anyone in Qingming world can you stop Yudo? Old Guanzhou sneered. Wu Shuangjiang has long given Yudo a saying that is similar to the conclusion of a coffin. If you do not cultivate morality, the people in the boat will be the enemy country and the way to die is. Speaking of this, Lao Guanzhou smiled. Sun Guanzhou is always a bad guy. After listening to this admonition, he openly scolded Wu Shuangjiang and said to let your mother's ass. My friend Yudo is who? Really invincible. What about an enemy country in one boat? What Yudo wants is this kind of feat that seems dangerous, but is actually a false alarm. As for the implication of the old Guanzhou, of course, in addition to Sui Chu Gong and Xian Du Guan, he who has now migrated Guan Tao Guan to the Qingming world is also a person in the same boat as Yudo. Cui Dongshan poured a cup of tea for the old Guanzhou. Senior, anyway, you and my husband are considered to have passed each other year after year. It's rare to take a trip to the Luopa mountain. Next time I visit, I really don't know that the year of the ox and the moon are worse than me. Take you around Jiesfeng? Old Guanzhou laughed and said, don't make friends with the poor roads indiscriminately. It is considered the best to give Qin Pingon a rubbing of the lotus flower blessed land. Cui Dongshan is still unwilling to give up. It's just a walk in Luopa mountain. Seniors didn't agree to it. It's too unreasonable. Every step this old Taoist takes in the world, the place where he sets foot is very particular because it is a place to cultivate everywhere. Plowing in spring and harvesting in autumn, wearing shackles for a long time, busy in the field all his life. Who are you talking about? The bullish temper of this old master is of course because of his bullish qualifications. What is the field? In the early years, the heaven and the earth were the fields. Above the earth, the soil all has age and attributes. The rain and grass grows, the tillers work hard, the farmers sow hundreds of grains, the mortals' homes camp the fields, the thin ground is dung and the light soil wraps it with ox feet. Then weak soil becomes stronger. While the art of squashing the green, the method of suppressing the green seems to be common, but in fact it has a lot of origins and the method of suppressing the victory. This old predecessor of the Taoist temple of the East China Sea, the path that he took, can finally turn the filthy stale air between the heavens and the earth into a clear air, and this mysterious clear air is more regarded as the fundamental aura of the Tao than the practitioners. And even more difficult to obtain with human resources. The spiritual qi is the foundation of practice, then clear qi is the source of luck. The old peasant ancestor in the hundreds of families, If he was lucky enough to meet this old master, he would only be more exaggerated than Cui Dongshan. Benefit to its people and good years. With fertile grains, it belongs to the good fortune of God and the year of the new year. How can Cui Dongshan miss this once-in-lifetime opportunity, and can't wait to take the veteran to walk through the green waters and green mountains of all the hills of his own. Being a person, you have to be so down to earth. Old Guanju shook his head. Such a simple way of profit and loss. Do you need me to teach you how to embroider tigers? Cui Dongshan looked sad and wiped the table back and forth with his sleeve. Senior cursed again. Old Guanju was full of sarcasm. You deserve to be the student of Qin Pingon, and you are not ashamed. Cui Dongshan's glamour was flying in an instant. The master of the old view is praised again, and I am a little caught off guard. The old master was too lazy to talk nonsense with this incomprehensible fellow, and he turned to the topic abruptly and said straightforwardly, the green cliffs on the banks of the Dragon's Beard must be taken away by the poor road. Now who is the land boundary over there in name? Lisong? Or the Ruanqiong who still holds the title of saint? In the words of the Dali court, it is easy to say that the poor road traveled to the site of the Liju cave, and after these steps, it was already compensated. The fine water flowed and the grace continued. If it is Ruanqiong, a monk on the mountain who owns the boundary of the Longxi River, then he can do a deal with him. Why give Ruanqiong this face? Of course, it is his daughter Ruanxiu. Relying on the realm, forcing and forbidding? In this way, the key is to pay attention to a cycle of heaven. A monk, as long as he lives long enough, he will truly understand a truth. If he owes a debt, he must pay the debt. Except for the head of the family, like the patriarch of Sanjiao, the whole world is 1 acre 3/4 of his own land. Once again, the first-class sites are blessed places and caves, similar to the lotus flower blessed places of the old master in his own home. Zhou Xian was a little surprised and glanced at Cui Dongshan on the side. Cui Dongshan looked helpless and shook his head to Zhou Xian. It was because I missed it and missed a big omission. Before, Cui Dongshan really didn't see the magic of that sandstone cliff. Otherwise, I had known this a long time ago, and I had already moved Cui Dongshan to Luopa Mountain as a feng shui stone, so that this stinky and old-fashioned object can be known to all fools. However, being a man is not afraid of making mistakes, and correcting and remedying mistakes is what he is. Cui Dongshan craned his neck, looked at the river and began to settle accounts. Longxi River was originally a small stream. If I remember correctly, it was called Huxi, and the Qin clan of Huxi in the early years belonged to Liju Dongtian. First-class surname, but later fell down. By coincidence, my ancestor happened to have a field over there. I really have to worry about it, but it's not our family business in Laupa Mountain. As for Tianqi, if the old master thinks he'll look back and find out. Of course, Cui Dongshan was talking nonsense. Old Guanju was so foolish. He directly separated out 3 mines, went to the county town and county office respectively, and the Longzhou Kiln Affairs Supervision Bureau, and quickly read it through. The household registration and land deeds even carefully deduced the Longxi River, which was called Wuxia in ancient times, the changes in the river course and the fields. Human affairs in the world, the foundation is moisturized, the ins and outs, there are traces to follow. Old Guanju retracted his mind, frowned slightly, and glanced at the blacksmith shop by the river. Lu Xianyang, a young sword repairman in the Yupu realm. Cui Dongshan suddenly realized, stroking his palms and smiling. Understood. It's no wonder that the Grand Master who traveled to the lotus flower blessed place back then praised the fall of the galaxy and the bottom of the lotus flower. Then I understand why you was deliberately thrown here on credit. It turns out that this is the opportunity for her to break the realm in the future. And it is impossible to say that the blue cliff is a moon palace mirror. What a strange stone. The blue cliff gathers the roots of clouds. Suspected is the ancient moon reunion falls here. Old master, I guessed it, right? Old Guanju said, you go and make a price for the poor Tao and the sword repairer. It's better to be less involved with this sleepwalking young man. Naturally, he is not afraid of a sword repair, but is worried about being careless. A certain ancient will follow the context to find his self, who has not yet attained Tao. Isn't everything going away? Lao Guan squinted his eyes and smiled. If you want to help him sit on the floor and raise the price, it's okay. Cui Dongshan drank a big sip of tea, moisturized his throat and shouted with his heartfelt voice. Lu Yusui and Lu Yusui brother, I have something to ask for. At the blacksmith's shop, Lu Xianyang was eating sunflower seeds on the bamboo chair under the eaves. He was busy chatting with Yu Qianyue on the side. He heard the voice of Brother Cui and said, "What is it? If you want to ask for something, please. Then don't speak." "No, I don't have such a brother." Cui Dongshan sniffed and wiped his face with his sleeve. "What is a brother?" "That's it for Brother Lu." Cui Dongshan quickly talked to Lu Xianying about the general situation. He said that the benefits of this transaction may have to be returned to Luopishan. Because of the lack of a treasure of Xianshan that he dreamed of, he just happened to be taken advantage of. That thing. Cui Dongshan didn't talk about any compensation what was converted into Guyu money to Lu Xianying. Lu Xianying turned his head and spit out the melon seed shell and said, "Damn it, it's a big deal, it's easy to talk, remember to let the bully give enough capital." Lu Xianying caught a glimpse of the round-faced girl from the corner of his eye, and suddenly shouted, "Wait a moment. Wait a moment, I have to discuss with girl Yu first." Cui Dongshan tweeted, "Lu Yu is asleep, what's the matter with you? If you have a daughter-in-law you will forget your brothers. It's okay. I can recognize you." Lu Xianying turned her head and Xie Yu roughly talked about the doorway of the stone cliff, which might be her chance of breaking, but when she heard about the Moon Palace and the treasures, she was the most annoyed of these twists and turns, so she simply pretended not to hear anything. "Besides, what about Lu Xianying, what do you ask me to do? What is our relationship? There seems to be nothing. Nowadays there are fewer and fewer ducks in the Longxi River, and there are fewer old duck bamboo shoots in the shop. Her mood is not getting better. So she also bought a litter of fluffy little ducklings. They only kept it day by day. After raising them they developed feelings." She also warned Lu Xianying not to make any decisions. Lu Xianying immediately replied to Cui Dongshan with her heartfelt voice. "Ms. Yu said it doesn't matter for my face, it doesn't matter what chance is not, she's not rare at all." Cui Dongshan was amazed. Sister-in-law is really a good match, Brother Lu is so lucky. Thinking of something, Cui Dongshan vowed to promise. "Looking back, you married Miss Yu. If my brother is the third largest member of the money, I will have your last name." Lu Xianying curiously asked, "Who gave the money to the biggest guy? Chen Pingyan?" Cui Dongshan laughed and said, "My husband has no money, it must be our chief of the week in Luopishan." Lu Xianying nodded and said, "Remember to remind Chief Shou if things are busy and there are not enough people, you can get the red envelopes and let him figure out how much money you can get. You have to help me with the specific words, Brother Cui. Then that's what I mean anyway." Cui Dongshan slapped his chest loudly. Old Guanju suddenly narrowed his eyes and said, "Cui Dongshan, you can say something to Lu Xianying, Xia will be a fairy soldier if he is refined properly." Cui Dongshan relayed this sentence without hesitation. Lu Xianying jumped on the spot and said, "Xian Bing. Brother Cui, please increase the price quickly and let the buyer add money to the death. It's okay anyway, it's just that. Don't bother me, otherwise the brothers won't have to do it." Cui Dongshan really stopped speaking and looked back from the Longxi River. A person like Lu Xianying is actually envious of everyone. The old Guanju took advantage of Cui Dongshan and Lu Xianying's speech, and made a little calculation to trace the origin. Lu Xianying's ancestors were proficient in the techniques of disturbing dragons, scorpion dragons and cutting dragons. In fact, he was given a compound surname Yulong, and the earliest Lu character was originally shaped like Axan warriors, and it was a very majestic one. After the Battle of Zhanlong, it is estimated that it was the ancestor of the Lu family and changed back to the Lu family name. Otherwise, in this Liju cave the descendants of the tribe will have the surname Yulong, which is too dazzling, and will be invisibly suppressed and restrained by a small cave, which will hurt the numerology of future generations. It will naturally be difficult for a family to flourish and multiply. Prosperity. Old Guanju asked, "This young man, did he know about his family affairs?" Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Do you know it's still Lu Xianying?" So Tianwan led the red line for Lu Xianying and Naipingxiang Jigui. Of course she did not do it at will. God, to enjoy food you will be able to settle down and live a life steadily, and the patriarch will have a great skill in appreciating food and eating, and you can eat it wherever you go. But if a person doesn't change his mind and doesn't think about it, in fact even if God and patriarch are enjoying the meal together, it's no good. It's like a person who has an empty rice bowl but no rice. You don't know the blessing in the blessing because you don't know how to take a step back and think. According to the mountain, this is called a discord between the art and the way. Of course Lu Xianying's qualifications are very good, but in fact, there are not many fairy seeds with the qualifications of monasticism in the world, and they just quietly spend their lives in the world and even live and seek a life, and their lives are not as good as many ordinary masters. If Lu Xianying's heart is slightly divergent, such as laziness, for example being stingy, maybe in Huaihuang County today, there will be an extra bachelor who goes around all day long and only complains all year round. Cui Dongshan asked with a smile. Senior, give me a price that matches a fairy soldier? Old Guanju stretched out his hand. A piece of purple moire paper was spread out of thin air on the table, and his fingers were drawn together. The most important book of Taoism in the world is to write the scriptures of 3 mountains and draw the runes of the true shape of the 5 mountains. Ancient immortal officials and gods, who must not be taught by immortals and green books. Early monks looking for famous mountains, looking for great waters, opening mountains and establishing sects, building cities along the water and admiring this picture. Mountain ghosts, strange narcissus and all evil spirits dare not get close. In the end, Tao Fa was scattered and widely spread in the world. In addition to the great circulated search for mountains, there are also these 5 sacred figures. It is just that the practitioners who draw this kind of Tao diagrams of later generations do not know the true rhyme of Tao Fa, and are unacceptable. Entering the door, the shape is not similar and the look is naturally more scattered. Cui Dongshan knew that Lao Guanju would know that he knew what he would give. No need to say anything. Cui Dongshan lay on the table, exclaiming amazement, expressing respect and gratitude. The old view master uses the Taoism, consumes the Tao Qi and infuses it with the subtle Taoism. In short, the old view master traces this map on the Taoism vein, like the method of rubbing a monument. The more you copy, the shallower the meaning. Zhou Xian carefully looked at the painting of the old Taoist, smiled and said, I can't afford to buy mountains to learn from the beauty, the weather is in the painting. After imitating it by myself, it seems that the 9-point form is not difficult, but in the end it is a bit like you have to wait for the pen to get the answer. Cui Dongshan twisted a corner of the scroll, shook it slightly and weighed it. It is guessed that this old master has displayed his supernatural powers for the 2nd time. If it is the first time, it will be an immortal soldier with both offense and defense. So the true picture in hand is inferior. This picture of the ancestor of the Taoist book can almost be regarded as a 2nd-class authentic. It's a pity that it's just a semi-celestial rank. If it's a heavy treasure of the attack, it won't be used up. It's just a violent thing. But if it's framed into a drawing and hung inside the house, it's terrific. Just 1 sentence, then in about 1,000 years, there will be no misfortune, and there will be no more worries of a house of cleverness and ghosts overlooking its households. Cui Dongshan sighed. Senior, it's not as easy to carry around as a shaft as it is mounted on the wall. The old view is indifferent. Cui Dongshan had to say. Senior himself said that he was a little refined and he is a fairy soldier, but in this Taoist picture, how can the younger be refined? How can he be promoted to the fairy soldier? Besides, the handwork of the senior is almost limited the best. The younger generation has no abilities and can't bear it, and even less dare to make superfluous things. Old Guanju smiled and said, then the poor Tao will take back the phrase refining the immortal soldier. Do you want to pretend that you didn't hear it, or is the poor Tao troublesome and take back a sentence so that you really can't hear it? The millet grains over the mountain gate were actually staring at the table all the time. She was mainly worried that the seeds would be gone or the tea would not be enough. Suddenly she noticed that big white goose had a hand around her back and hooked herself. Xiaomi Li frowned her 2 small eyebrows. What is the big white goose doing? My own clever little brain is not enough. She thought about it, but she still didn't understand. It was because she was powerless and couldn't help. I don't care about the millet grains, so I said a word in advance, stood on tiptoe and shouted to the kind-looking old gentleman. Old gentleman, do you like tea? Would you like some tea? Old Guanju smiled and nodded. Millet grains rushed to Jing Daifeng's house immediately and took tea to the old chieftain. While running, he turned his head and reminded, Old chieftain, you're not chasing guests. Keep drinking tea and eating melon seeds. Wait a while, don't worry. Let me help you get more. Luo Guan stood up, but 2 more white jade scrolls appeared on the table. Julian smiled at Cui Dongshan. Sure enough, we still have a big frame for the right guardian and it has the most face. The old Guanju waved his sleeve and put the rock cliff into his sleeve. The green cliff on the riverside is still there and the shape is divine. Cui Dongshan put away the picture scroll and the white jade axis, and then stood up with Julian. This point of hospitality is still necessary. Unexpectedly, the old Guanju took his seat again and sneered. Why did you want to leave? Luopashen wants to drive guests? Cui Dongshan sat down and Zhou Xian asked with a smile, "Why don't you go up the mountain to eat a meal before leaving?" As a result, the old View Master turned a deaf ear, stood up again and said, "Whether it is waking up from a dream or falling into a dream, you will be treated as if you owe a meal in the Qingming world. If you die in this mountain for so long, then you will be the poor." I didn't say anything. Zhou Xian smiled and nodded. Old Guanzhou finally took a pot of tea from the little girl in black and thanked him. The millet grain scratched his head. The old man is too polite. The master of Laoguan raised his eyes and overlooked. The mountains and rivers stretched. The water was low and the mountains were high. "Why mountaineering and what is monasticism?" murmured. The mountains echoed. Qingtu Weijin and Chaojun were inexplicably, just like the hosts of the Great Wall of Sorqi. Those who come and go must come and say hello to them. Insert an app. A perfect re-engraving of the old version of the book-chasing artifact. An app that can change the source. Chaojun is very happy. In recent years, it can be said that the time has come to work, staying around to practice swordsmanship, and met a lot of big people one after another. First he met an unknown Daoist who seemed to be Qin Ping's uncle, and then he returned to his hometown. Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji, and the third master of Baiyujing, Lu Chen, even invited himself to the Qingming world in person, and why not enter the summer palace? Our uncle Chaojun can follow as long as he nods his head. Master Lu is a guest at Baiyujing. Qin Sanqiu and Dai Zhang fell directly beside Xiao Yunyan. The former sword fairy of Chunban's High also has Mrs. Yen Yen, and the digital sword of the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect. Xiao Yunyan explained the situation to the two local swordsmen. For Qin Sanqiu, Xiao Yunyan is very optimistic. Qin Sanqiu wondered, "Xiao Jianxian, is Qin Pingon broken again?" Xiao Yunyan shook his head. "It's still Yupu realm, but I don't know what's going on." After Master Lu borrowed the lotus crown to the hermit, the realm suddenly became indistinct. Qin Sanqiu can call Qin Pingon by his name casually, and Xiao Yunyan still has to be respectfully called a hermit. Dai Zhang said, "Wherever people go, business will follow wherever they go. The second shopkeeper will definitely not lose money." Mrs. Yen Yen was originally on Qin Ping In's side, and she finally had a little more confidence. But after being so troubled today, she started to commit crimes to the hermit. "Why, in the Haoran world I became the closed disciple of Master Wensheng, and became the last hermit in the Great Wall of Jianqi. I still don't give up. I will go to Qingming world in the future, and I won't be able to be the four masters of Baiyujing." Qin Sanqiu knelt on one knee, looking into the distance in a daze. The melancholy traveler who likes to drink finally returned to his hometown, but the person he was thinking of was in another country and he dared not even drink. Next to the stack, the woman has one-armed, one sleeve is knotted, she is thin and slender, but she carries a big sword. The awe-inspiring scenes of the world are indeed all surprising. The mountains and rivers are magnificent. The four seasons have four seasons, the water surface is clear and round, and the mountain flowers bloom like burning. The fisherman on the river is supported by an worm, and the rest of the clouds are in the spring, and they are scattered into beautiful flowers. They are all extremely beautiful scenes, but I have seen them, but they are just like that. I see more and forget more. It is Qin Sanqiu who has published an extra travel notebook, which records in detail the customs and experiences along the way. Xiao Yunyan knew the origin of the two swords, which was borrowed by a Liang and Dallas imitation by Yujing back then, jokingly. "You two have such a good relationship with the hermit, you even missed the sect of Luopa Mountain. The celebration is very unacceptable. Why, I am worried that the Song clan will ask you for these two long swords. Beipingzu, especially the Kendo heir luck of the Dai dynasty, in fact will receive some gifts invisibly. In addition to the existence of Qin Pingon and Wei Jin, it is like a barren field that is not suitable for farming, and there will be Kendo seeds constantly growing. As for the fate of swordsmanship in the old Zhuang dynasty, it is nothing compared to the Great Wall of Swordsmanship." Tucked at the corners of his mouth, "Return the sword? What kind of sword was given to us by Aoliang? If the court of Dali has the ability, go to talk to Aoliang." Qin Sanqiu smiled and said, "It's okay, you're welcome with Qin Pingon. After the big deal there will be the next celebration in Luopa Mountain. Dai Zhang and I will each give 2 gifts." Over the years of travels in various continents in Haoran, apart from sword practice, foreign objects have been rewarded little by little. For example, during the period in Dai Zhang in Luxiazu, they strayed into a forbidden mountain and water secret, and both sides picked up some treasures. An appointment has been made with Dai Zhang, And when anyone enters the upper 5 realms, they will create their own kendo sect in the wild world. Daizhong is the suzerain. He come to be the founder of the law of the mountain palm. Flying city in the colorful world. Needless to say, the contention is not one moment in one place, but the whole world for thousands of years. Qi Tingji established the Dragon Elephant Sword sect. Qin Pingan's Luopa Mountain is also the beginning of the Zhong. Qingming Xianxia. I only mentioned that Dong Huafu and Yan Ming, who are in my friends, will definitely not be any Taoist officials in their lives. In the future they will all be established in the mountain. It is estimated that they will be similar to themselves in Daizhong. The two are in partnership. Fatty Yen is unwilling to make money, but Dong Haitan is a perfect match to spend money on Dong Haitan. Especially Dong Huafu. He is a child with weird temperament when he was young. In Dong Sanjing's words, "It is my Dong family who has a talented genius. At a young age I know how to walk Aoyang." Dong Huafu is really close to Aoyang in size and he doesn't see him at all. Every time he goes out he likes to find Aoyang. He runs all the way and chooses all the way. Finally he returns the same way. Because there is a money bag around him, the child is the same. Aoyang, give me money. Quarreling or fighting with peers on Taixiang Street and Yuhu Street. It's fine if you can't fight, but if you can't fight just say something cruel. Wait, I'll go to Aoyang and let him kill you. Meeting those unreserved adults who made fun of his mother's dear Mu Aoyang. What a fool with me, be careful I let Aoyang out. Pang Yuanji in the Summer Palace seems to have gone to the Western Buddhist country. In such a barren world, there should also be the opening of the Great Wall of Jianqi. All the sects in the world, the common ancestral mountain, the earliest ancestor hall, is probably the Great Wall of Jianqi at the foot. The future is still vast, but the future is definitely expected. Probably this is what Qin Pingan calls, a person no matter who he is has so many hopes. Xianxia's current hopes are also several. In addition to creating sects in the wild world, he will also go to Wuxia world in the future and meet his ancestors. Of course there is that girl Dong Bu who has been asking for it. He Qiuxing and Qin Sanqiu said, "I have seen Qin Jianxian." Before, on the side of Dragon Elephant Sword sect, He Qiuxing and Qin Sanqiu met, but they couldn't speak. Qin Sanqiu frowned and said, "You have admitted the wrong person, I am not Qin Pingan." The teenager was caught off guard. Looking at the white sword fairy with a displeased face, the young man felt anxious. As a son of the Qin family on Taixiang Street, Qin Sanqia's family ancestor was the old sword fairy Qin Shi who engraved the city head like master. And master said in private that Qin Sanqiu who stayed in the vast world had a great future. Not low. Once you join Confucianism you may have a certain natal character. However, the reason why He Qiuxing wanted to say a few words to Qin Sanqiu was that the teenager actually had a strange reason because there was an autumn character in their names. Qin Sanqiu suddenly smiled and said, "Remember, in the future, don't call a sword repairman in the Yuan-Ing realm Jianxian, because it is easy to be slapped by a sack." He Qiuxing was speechless. Wu Manyan, a girl with bright eyes and an outspoken heart, came to Daizhong and said loudly, "I am glad to see Senior Daizhong again." Daizhong smiled and nodded. In fact, the first time I met the little girl in Nanpasuazhou in his early years, Daizhong was puzzled afterwards. The little girl's words and deeds were respectful and respectful. In her smart and lovely eyes, she seemed to be full of admiration for herself. Daizhong didn't know what Wu Manyan admired about what she did, so she wouldn't lose her arm than ordinary people. Wu Manyan really has a heartfelt respect for Daizhong. The reason couldn't be simpler. The woman in front of her is a prosperous wine shop treasurer. Big shopkeeper. Hidden officials are just second shopkeepers. Mr. Liu said that in business, Mr. Qin was better at Jianqi Great Wall than when he was a hidden official in the Summer Palace. In the Great Wall of Jianqi, Mr. Qin can no longer be an official as an official, except that he is still under the control of the old sword fairy in name, then only the sister Daizhong in front of him can let Mr. Qin come to help. Not far away, 5 Tonggizong Jianxiu joined together at the top of the city. The previous heavy snow came and went without a trace, and then the 5 sword lights dragged the sky, making them realize that today's Jianqi Great Wall sight must happen. Unusual things of gods and people. In my heart my identity is special. Li Wanyong, carrying an ancient sword Qi Zhuan, is a direct disciple of the former suzerain. Du Yan, because he is a child of the Du family, is the most difficult one among the 5. In just over 10 years he has suffered a lot of catastrophes. The family affairs and the family have all the problems. This young sword repairman feels that he will eat all the grievances of his life. When I was full, I replaced it with bitterness. As for Qin Shuihu, he has great literary attainments since he was a child. He has a clear and beautiful poetry, and he is famous on the mountain and under the mountain. He is especially good at long fu, discussing before the narrative and coming in the second time. Around that year I was a guest in Tonggizong for a while, and I personally said that there was even a decent seed for reading. Master Wang looked respectful, took the lead in holding his fist and asked Wei Jin, "Dare to ask Wei Jianxian, where does this vision come from?" Master Wang is the only one who has practiced in the Great Wall of Sword Qi among the 5 swordsmen of Tonggizong. This Jianxiu born in Tongya Xianxia was in the Golden Core realm at that time, and then left the Jianqi Great Wall with the left and right to rush to Tonggizong. In the Great Wall of Jianqi, Master Wang didn't have the nerve to say his hometown. Whether it was his situation or his temperament, it was a bit similar to the old Jian Ziyu who has now become the worship of Luopa Mountain. Bao Pingzhou, because there were young hidden officials and Fengxue Temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties, instead of being looked down upon by the Great Wall of Jianqi, he took a high look. At any rate, there were 2 sword immortals who went to death generously in Aizhou, and later there was a female sword immortal Xianxia who made military exploits. Only Tong Yezhou on the side of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is simply worthy of the name. Wei Jin explained, Qin Pingon, Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji and Bai Yujing taught Zhou Xian. The 5 went to the wilderness to help Aoliang who was in the hinterland battlefield. Master Wang was stunned. Ning Yao and Qi Tingji are sword repairmen in the Ascension realm. Lu Ji is one of the top 10 peak sword immortals in the city. Although he is still in the Fairyland for the time being, his combat power is completely comparable to that of the Ascending Realm sword repair. The key is why there is more Zhou Xian. Furthermore, Aoliang and the left and right, how can they run to the hinterland of the wild world to shoot their swords together? And such a lineup led by the hidden official all the way south, who dares to show up and who can stop it in the wild world. 5 sword repairmen, a 14th realm monk who did not kill. Master Wang was slurried, but he didn't dare to ask Wei Jin anymore. Yu Exen hesitated for a moment and asked in his heart, Wei Jianxian, how is Mr. Zhua? Caring is messy. Wei Jin said, if the overall situation of the battlefield has been decided, Qin Pingon will not go this trip. Yu Exen breathed a sigh of relief. Li Wanyong glanced at this famous Snow Wind Temple Great Sword Immortal, obviously a little surprised. A great sword immortal with outstanding combat power, why didn't he walk with them? It is a joke to say that the Wei and Jin dynasty are greedy for life and fear of death. I used to ask the heavenly monarch of Jianbei Juluzhou twice to thank you in the Yupu realm and the fairy realm, so this is strange. Wei and Jin were amiable on Wang Shizi's side, because Wang Shizi as a wild cultivator was willing to come to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and Wang Shizi practiced his sword beside Mr. Zhua. As for this person who didn't recognize him, he kept looking at himself with his eyes, so Wei Jin reminded him, external sword repairers, keep your eyes in check. There are only 2 types of sword repairs in the world. Those who have made swords in the Great Wall of Sword Qi and those who have never been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Chao Jun smiled and said, there are 2 groups of genealogical monks from the Middle-earth divine continent in front of us. Our mountain owner, oh, the hermit, has lost the slightest temper. Lessons learned, you outsiders, you must let me take it as a warning. Besides, our mountain lord is more grudges. How did Jingyang Mountain end? Have you heard of it? Especially Li Jianxian, I heard that there is a little conflict with the hermit's senior brother Zhua. Li Wanyong glanced at Chao Jun glanced at Li Wanyong. Can actually be regarded as a pair of difficult brothers who have the same disease, but the 2 of them are even more displeased with each other. On the other side of the sun pendant, the station people include Su Zi, Lu Qi and Dalisong Chongjing Yugui sect master Wei Ying. The Tonggizong has been unsettled in recent years and has risen again. After the war ended, the reason why he was able to falter and never fall was due to 2 forces. One was the Dali dynasty in Aquarius Island in the north, and the other was Ben. The Yuguazong of Zhouzhou, the new Lord Wei Ying, did not fall into the pit, and took advantage of the situation to infiltrate, split and erode Tonggizong. Instead, during the proceedings of the Zhongtu Confucian Temple, he said a few words of great weight for Tonggizong. Can get this, love. So the 5 sword repairmen of Tonggizong, the final destination of this trip is not the Great Wall of Sword Qi, but to go to Guishu Sun Pendant to visit Song Chongjing and Wei Ying. Moreover, Qin Shuihu and Du Yan are fans of Su Zi and Lu Qi respectively, The kind who can be happy for many years by being able to meet and say a few words. Currently, the position of Sect Master Tongye and the Patriarch Master of Rules are temporarily suspended. After these few young sword repairers discussed, they made a decision: whoever is the first or second one to enter the Yupu realm, whoever will be the lord and the ruler will hold the front. Wait until Tonggizong gradually recovered his vitality, and then replace it again. In fact, the Tonggizhao Patriarch Hall today is just a few of their young people. Next, Yu Xin went to chat with Mrs. Yan Yan. She seemed to have a relationship with Wu Manyan. Master Wang stayed with Wei Jin, and with this Fengxue Temple Great Sword Immortal, he humbly asked some questions about swordsmanship. Qin's Sleeping Tiger's sword went to the old master He Shou. Please ask. Du Yen found Xiao Yunyan because the family had a bit of dispensable incense with the Diaoshuan Mountain Chunfan's high earlier, and they were all business dealings. It is said that Xiao Zhenxian is not only the genealogical monk of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, but also from the earliest Dragon Elephant Sword sect guest, was promoted to the person in charge of money. Within 100 years, Xiao Yunyan will be in charge of all affairs of the Zhongmen treasury, and then help the Zhongmen to deal with people and things. He agreed with Qi Tingji for 100 years. Xiao Yunyan will only be a transitional person in charge of money. When the Dragon Elephant Sword sect finds a suitable candidate, Xiao Yunyan will resignation. Tong Yezhou is actually two neighbors, Aquarius Island and Nanpasu Island. Wei Jin glanced at the woman, Jian Xiu named Yu Xin, and she gave birth to an exquisite heart. There is still hope for Tonggizong to rise again. Just have to boil. Wei Jin's horizontal sword is on his knees looking towards the south. I don't know if Lianghe and Qin Pingon can all return safely. At the gate of Luopa Mountain, just as the old Guanju was about to leave, Cui Dongshan suddenly asked in his heart, "Can you figure it out?" Old Guanju nodded. It's not difficult to calculate the process, but the result is unpredictable. Cui Dongshan looked solemn and asked, "How about it?" Old Guanzhou smiled and said, "For example, 2 people have been promoted to 14 levels, such as someone's sword opening to the Moon Mountain.